Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this webinar. This is webinar number 7, brought to you by the Commission on Higher Education, Regional Office 11, and the University of Southeastern Philippines, one of the centers of development in IT education in the region. I am Maureen Villamor from USEP, and I will be your moderator this afternoon. We are currently streaming live on Facebook and YouTube. So if you're on Facebook and YouTube, kindly hit the share button so that others can also watch. To formally start this webinar, let us first have our opening prayer.
Dear Father in heaven, thank you for the many blessings that you've given us. Thank you for life and love and our friends and family, Lord. And thank you for this beautiful day. Thank you for loving us and giving us peace when all the world can feel like chaos. Lord, we pray today for those in the world who face adversities that we can't begin to imagine. We ask that you be with those who are scared or hungry or lonely and help them to feel the comfort of your Holy Spirit. We ask, Lord, that you provide for all those in need, both physically and emotionally, Lord, and give them hope for tomorrow, Father. We ask that you be with our leaders and guide them to make good decisions that will make this world a better and more secure place to live. And Lord, help calm the anxieties in our minds about the future and help us to remember your love for us and your promise to never abandon us. Help our hearts to be filled with compassion as we reach out to those around us. Help us, Lord, to be salt and light in the world as we share your love with all those around us. Please continue to lead us and guide us and direct us, revealing to us your perfect will for our lives, Lord. It is in Jesus' precious name that we pray. Amen.
Okay, this afternoon we are graced with two distinguished resource persons who will be presenting to us two equally exciting topics. Given their extensive experience abroad, it's a guarantee that we can learn a lot of things from them that we can bring to our workplace. But before I introduce the sessions, a gentle reminder for a more meaningful and productive webinar. May I ask everyone to please mute your mic. We ask you to mute yourself by tapping the mic icon. Check your name tag. Make sure your complete name appears in the meeting. This will be the basis for the issuance of your e-certificates. Turn your video on or off. If you have fast internet connection, please turn your video on. However, if connection is a challenge, you may turn your video off. Use chat box and raise hand option. If you want to say something, use the raise hand option and wait for me to acknowledge you so I can ask Sir Rod to unmute you. You can also type in the chat box, but make sure it's clear and there are no typographical errors in the message because everyone can see it and it will no longer be deleted. Talk audibly and wait. When speaking, do it slowly and clearly. Pump up the volume and make sure that you're close enough to your microphone. And lastly, I would like to seek your cooperation in completing this webinar. Remember that we start as one, we end as one, we learn as one. And to formally welcome us to this webinar, may I call in one of my former professors and members of my thesis committee when I was doing my master's in USEP, who is no other than our dynamic CHED Regional 11 Director, Dr. Maricar R. Casquejo.
To all of you, wherever you are, who are watching, listening to CHED 11's 7th webinar, I hope you're always in the best of health. Good afternoon, everyone. Today's webinar is still part of CHEDRO 11's assistance in the retooling of the higher education institutions personnel and to our aspiration that as one region, we will learn as one. The first part, which is embedding pedagogy and blending Edtech solutions in the learning design of a virtual classroom, a portfolio of good practices will be discussed by Dr. Carlo Domingo Casinto. This will tackle about the strengths and challenges of different modalities of flexible learning, among other topics, including the sharing of insights on virtual teaching experience. The second part is input on the use of engaging strategies and apps in blended learning, an insight into an experience in New Zealand, which will be tackled by Dr. Maria Chanda Gado-Antoque. You will learn what goes well and not so great about blended learning and how to maximize the use of Facebook as a learning tool. There are two reasons why personally I am excited for this afternoon's webinar. Aside from the fact that this is back-to-back, it is also an honor to have our dear friends as the resource persons. We are excited to the inputs and sharing of our resource persons based on their personal practice and experience. We will go directly on hearing what are being practiced, lessons learned, and what needs to be replicated because of the proven success and workability. I have known Dr. Carlo Domingo Casinto when he was still connected in the University of the Immaculate Conception as assistant professor. Dr. Maria Chanda Gado-Antoque is a dear friend. Just like Dr. Casinto, she is also once connected in the University of the Immaculate Conception as an associate professor. So we share the same alma mater, the University of the Immaculate Conception. At present, Dr. Casinto and Dr. Antoque are successful academicians, educational managers, and administrators abroad. They will be properly introduced later. Thank you, Dr. Casinto and Dr. Antoque, for the gifts of your expertise, free service, and most of all, friendship. We are just so happy to see you virtually. My acknowledgement also to our partners in conducting this webinar series, the University of Southeastern Philippines, headed by President Lourdes C. Generalao. The University of Southeastern Philippines is one of the centers of development for information technology education in this region. Let me also acknowledge Dr. Randy Gamboa, the Dean of Institute of Computing. We were able to have generous experts as our resource persons because of the assistance of Dr. Gamboa. My acknowledgement also for the CHEDRO 11 technical team headed by Dr. Luis D. Perez and Dr. Emma K. Bunsobre, and of course to Engineer Rod Pangantihon, Education Supervisor of this office, and the team for doing a great job and spearheading the conduct of our series of webinars. Thank you once again, Picari Prime, for the Zoom account. As CHEDRO 11 continues to serve its stakeholders and as we continue to live by our tagline, We Find Solutions, we are hoping for your usual support and cooperation to our incoming webinars. while taking into account the safety of our personnel, students, and other stakeholders, and without compromising the quality of the learning experiences of the students and our commitments to academic excellence, together as one united institutions of higher education in Region 11, we will learn as one. Thank you everyone for making yourselves available. Have a productive webinar and keep safe always.
Thank you, ma'am, for that warm welcome. There had been some changes in the program, though, as our resource person decided to swap schedules. And just to reiterate what Ma'am Maricar mentioned, the first session is going to be about the use of engaging strategies and apps in blended learning and insight into my experience in New Zealand. In this session, we will learn about what goes well and not so great about blended learning, the New Zealand experience, accessible learning apps, Facebook as a learning tool, and developing digital course outline or plan. Our first speaker is a former English and religious education teacher at Sacred Heart Girls Hamilton, a former English teacher at Fairfield College Hamilton, Queen Elizabeth, Palmerton North, a former associate professor of the graduate and undergraduate programs of the University of the Immaculate Conception, Davao City, Philippines. And she is currently the Director of Religious Studies, Head of Department of the Religious Education at Rosmini College, Auckland, New Zealand. Let us all give a digital clap to Dr. Maria Chanda Gado-Antoque. Take it away, ma'am. Kindly unmute your microphone, please, ma'am. We cannot hear you yet.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, ma'am. Loud and clear.
Okay, thank you. I just have to share my screen. Hang on. See my screen now. Can anyone hear me?
Yes, ma'am. You
And
can
you
already
see
see
my?
it.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am. I can see it.
Thank you. So I am Chanda. I have been teaching for the last 25 years. And in my past life, I started as a reading teacher for 3 years at St. Marie's Academy of Davao. I taught English and literature at the University of the Immaculate Conception for 12 years, starting as an instructor and capping my stint with an associate professor position, teaching both in the graduate and undergraduate programs of my beloved university. Yes, I'm an older, by the way, as I earned my bachelor's degree and PhD from UIC. Now, this is my 11th year in New Zealand. I started as an English teacher, teaching English to native speakers of the language. And to think that English is my third language. And so early on, I knew I could not compete with the native speakers. So to thrive and be more relevant, I needed to make that shift, which I did. I studied another master's in education at the Waikato University here in Hamilton. I shifted from language to social sciences in 2013. Now, having been raised and bred a Catholic, I ventured into the Catholic education system here. I taught English and religious education at a girls' college, and after 2 years, I started teaching RE full-time, or religious education full-time. I had to earn another degree to be qualified though, so I got myself a diploma in religious studies. So for 25 years, I was a professional student. Now, as mentioned earlier, I am currently the Director of Religious Studies at Rosmini College. It's a decile 9Q school in the North Shore of Auckland, New Zealand. A decile is a group into which similar schools in New Zealand are placed. Some schools are in decile 1, meaning to say the school have the highest proportion of students from low socioeconomic backgrounds, while schools in decile 10, for example, have the highest proportion of students from high socioeconomic backgrounds. Now, Rosmini is a boys' college, and we are highly competitive, both in sporting and academic. We sort of raise the Catholic lawyers, doctors, engineers, and sportsmen of New Zealand, so to speak. The current sportsman of the year in New Zealand is my student. His name is Tain Murray, and the captain of our basketball team. Rosmini College is ranked number 6 in the World Basketball Championship in Greece. Now, all about me is done and dusted. So let's get down into business. We call that here a mihi. When you speak to people, you have to introduce yourself, and you have to sort of start from your history and your current sort of story. And that's my current story. Now, I have been invited to share my insights being a practitioner in one of the first countries that ventured into online teaching at the onset of COVID-19 in March of this year. First, I would like to begin by describing to you my teaching context. Now, New Zealand has 8 universities. All are in the top 500 of the QS World Ranking. Auckland University is ranked 81 this year. University education here is way different than in the Philippines. Students attend lectures for an hour or more in theaters, usually a 300 heads seating capacity, or sometimes in bigger lecture theaters sitting 500 people. These lectures are recorded and students can access them wherever and whenever they need to. Students have the option to attend tutorials, and these are classes with tutors, or in Philippine setting, the instructors who can help students in their assignments. Attendance and oral recitation do not count as part of the grading system. Now, university students, except those with laboratory subjects and internships, don't need to physically attend class to pass the subject. They can stay at home and attend university via Canvas, a virtual classroom where they have discussion boards and where videos of lectures and assignments are posted. They submit their assignment online, and the only time that they need to go to the university, to physically go to the university, is when they sit their exams on campus. Now, our colleges here, like Rosmini College, our colleges here are similar to the British system, where after completing secondary school, students have what they call further education. That's before the higher education, which we call in the Philippines as college or university. When you say further education, it's pre-university for 2 years. In New Zealand, we have combined secondary schools and further education and call them colleges. We have a year 13 here. So if one meets the university entrance criteria after year 13, he or she goes to a university. If not, there are pathway courses offered in polytechnics. that will lead to a university degree later on. Unlike in the United States or in the Philippines, in New Zealand, a bachelor's degree is completed in 3 years. Now, amidst the growing threat of a second wave of coronavirus, hang on, I cannot. I'm sorry, I have to. Sorry, I have to. Amidst the growing threat of a second wave of coronavirus worldwide, here in New Zealand, life is back to normal. We congregate and hold classes as per normal before COVID-19. It has been 79 days of no new case that could be linked to community transmission. But on March 23 this year, our Prime Minister announced the New Zealand COVID-19 alert levels model, and 2 days later, we were in a lockdown. Now, the school leaders were scrambling to their feet to draft guidelines and processes for online teaching and learning. By fury, were we prepared? I think my answer to that is yes. And why do I say that? Now, online teaching and learning has been part of the New Zealand education system. We have a correspondence school established in the early 1920s, catering to the needs of young children and adults who were taught the New Zealand curriculum via a range of media. So, in early 1920s or 30s, or maybe 50s and 70s, learning activities were sent via mail. And after that, we made use of radio and television to broadcast lessons. In the early 1990s, video conferencing became a medium. And starting from year 2000, online programs, have been made available. Now, as teachers in New Zealand, we have that certain level of autonomy in our teaching decisions. The system encourages us to adapt our teaching and the curriculum to meet the learning needs of our students. Now, you would be so surprised that it has been years since I last held in my hand a workbook for English or a workbook for religious studies, because we developed our own resources like worksheets and the like, and we tailor them to the needs of our actual students in class. Now, New Zealand students are also encouraged to learn how to be independent learners. Our curriculum document calls this self-management. We have this in our vocabulary when we speak to them. We say, manage your distraction. Instead of saying, stop talking, we say, mate, please manage your distraction. Or manage your learning instead of do your work. Now, New Zealand education has been hailed as the top English-speaking country in the world and in the Asia-Pacific region that educates its young people for the future. We have retained that record in the last 2 years, 2018 and 2019. Now, the Educating for the Future Index evaluates the way countries approach future-focused education to encompass problem-based learning, innovative teaching methods, and broader themes of global citizenship. Now, I think I would like to attribute this to the pedagogical approaches that underpin our system. And I would like to emphasize one. We call it teaching. The model, we call it teaching as inquiry. And teaching as inquiry is well emphasized in our curriculum document. Now, what is this model? Now, this model is different from inquiry-based learning or inquiry learning. Now, in this model, the teacher becomes a learner. We call it teaching as inquiry. You reflect, you inquire into your practice as a teacher. And we have here the cyclical process. You see on my screen, the cyclical process of this model, teaching as inquiry. And the first thing that I would like to emphasize is this. Now, since any teaching strategy works differently in different contexts for different students, effective pedagogy requires that teachers inquire into the impact of their teaching on their students. Now, inquiry into the teaching-learning relationship can be visualized. And I think you have that on your screen now as a cyclical process that goes on moment by moment as teaching takes place day by day and over the longer term. In this process, the teacher asks, okay, in focusing inquiry, what is important and therefore worth spending time on, given where my students are at? That's the first question you have to inquire on as a teacher. This model came into play, during our handling of the classes during lockdown. It was immediate, and we were given 3 days to prepare. Our leadership team thought of our priorities. Okay, what is the most important? Okay, where are our students? The lockdown happened at the 7th week, I think on the, not 7th week, but yet 6th week, and we were just starting. And everything was just out of place because we were not expecting that it would happen, that suddenly. And so we identified our, our priorities, and we decided there and then that we could not hold assessments. So what's the focus? So we decided as college to operate, and it's more on developing and strengthening, the literacy and numeracy skills of our students before the assessment, which would happen when class resumes. And then we move on to the teaching inquiry. Although we have been using blended learning for I think, years and years. I've used it when I was still a teacher at Sacred Hearts Girls College, and that's 4 years ago. So I've probably used it the last 7 years. So we use Google Suite. And so what strategies are most likely to help our students learn during this time? And so later on, I will show you some of the strategies that we use, not just during lockdown, but when we do blended learning. Going back to teaching as inquiry. So okay, when you focus, going back to focusing inquiry, it's a matter of establishing a baseline and a direction. Now, as teacher, use all available information to determine what the students have already learned and what they need to learn next. Now, I mentioned about our educational system. Now, we have the secondary school, the intermediate, they call it middle school in the States. Intermediate, we have the secondary school and the pre-university, which is the level 3, level 2, and level 3. Now, the thing about New Zealand education, starting from year 12 to university, is that we have what I call a seamless progression or transition. In my subject, for example, in year 11, the task of students would be to describe concepts, theories, ideas, etc. In year 12, task of students progress to explaining concepts, theories, ideas, etc. And then in year 13, the tasks are then transitioned to analyzing concepts, theories, ideas, and etc. Then at university, they are more applying learned concepts, theories, and ideas. Now, in the teaching inquiry, the teacher uses evidence from research and from their own past practice and that of colleagues to plan teaching and learning opportunities aimed at achieving the outcomes prioritized in the focusing inquiry. So in year 12 assessment tasks, for example, activities are directed towards developing their literacy skills that enable them to explain ideas. And we do that in repetition. Then we move on to analysis. And again, we have to teach them how to analyze. And we do that again in repetition so that by the time they get to university, they are well equipped to move on to the next level. And it is in the teaching inquiry that, we have this, what we call the high trust model. I can just, if things don't work for me, I can just go to my colleague and ask my colleague to come and co-teach with me or watch me teach and tell me what's wrong with my teaching. I don't seem to be working well with this class, or I don't seem to be working well using this strategy. And so, a colleague would come and watch you teach and give suggestions. A colleague could either be your head of department or your deputy headmaster or someone from within, from within the department or from within the college. And this person can give you inputs. And there is no politics in that, really. I don't know if that would thrive in other school settings outside of New Zealand. But we have this high trust model that as a colleague, you are in my room right now because you want to help me. Okay. And it could also mean that you use evidence-based approaches. And if they don't work, reflect again. Okay. Now, the next process is teaching and learning. And there's a word ako there. It's not ako, but we say ako. And the concept of ako means both to teach and to learn. It recognizes the knowledge that both teachers and learners bring to learning interactions. It acknowledges the way that new knowledge and understanding can grow out of shared learning experiences. So what happened as a result of the teaching? And what are the implications for future teaching? I could not see it from this angle though. Okay. Now, in this cyclic process, when things don't work, okay, you always ask the question, is there something I need to change? And where do you get that information? Again, from colleagues, but in my experience, I get that from my students. Like, I was teaching for 5 years. I was teaching in a girls' college. Then I moved to a boys' college. And I really struggled because boys and girls don't learn in the same way. And so one of the boys told me in my first year that I should stop treating them as girls and I should look at them as boys. And, you know, that was my starting point. So I get inputs from my students on how they want to learn things. Now, boys learn in bits and pieces, not in chunks. So I took that on board. The writing of the essay drafts in a supervised assessment is done in 3 parts. In a 50-minute period, I see to it that I only use at the most 20 minutes for instruction or teacher talk. As most young people and adults, attention span is just 20 minutes. And the rest activity, whether individual or group. Now, teaching as an inquiry, as a process, is all about being willing to take risks, to be wrong, to fail in your endeavors, and then change direction and start again. It is about reflecting on what you do and then changing your practice, sometimes in a small way, sometimes much bigger. Now, I would like to cite an example where a new teacher that I'm mentoring, she comes from another industry, and she has just joined us again in the teaching profession. And so I'm currently mentoring her. And I struggled with one particular class. And so I asked her if she could come and watch me teach. And the issue at that time was, Black lives. It's a big thing here in New Zealand. Black lives matter. And I countered that. And I told my students, I don't agree with it, but it's more of like, all lives matter, not Black lives matter. And for 3 periods, my classes with this particular group was very, very unsuccessful. So I invited her over and asked her if she could come and join me in that class and observe and give me inputs later on. Why? I could not understand why I was struggling to just keep the boys at bay and keep them, to manage their distractions. And it turned out that the problem was more of my tone. The boys were already agitated. And whenever I counter them, I use very, very strong language, and they were not happy with it. And so those are one of the inputs that, my teacher, one of my teachers, who's the youngest, and she's also new to the profession because she's been away for quite a time now. And it's a humbling experience to be told that, these are the things that you've not done well. And because of that process we have in our curriculum, the way we run our curriculum, this learning is inquiry, I think I have really, grown a lot in my practice. Now, in recent years, our colleges have been encouraged to utilize strategies that maximize technology. Now, one strategy in mind is flipped, that I would like to share to you is flipped classrooms. Now, I find it really effective in my year 13 classes. The topics that I taught range from existential questions that confront Catholics and secular humanists, bioethics, moral philosophy, to hermeneutics. Now, my headmaster would refer to level 2 and level 3 RE as the academic religious education. Now, for their assessment, they have to write an essay of 3,000 words. They do 3 assessments in 7 months. And we have 10 weeks to teach and assess a topic, or we call it a standard here. Now, and these are 18-year-old, young men. Many of them are like 17 going 18. And how in the world could I teach the content in 6 weeks without putting the less able kids at a disadvantage? Now, for 3 years now, I've used Flip Classroom to channel my energy and time to students who are needing more help. So what is Flip Classroom? Let's watch this.
Tests in class and retests. Teaching students best study the topic. Currently, kids with caring parents will listen.
Ma'am Chanda, parang may ano po sa mic sa audio. Hindi po ano yung audio niya.
Hindi
Hindi po marinig yung audio niya po. Ng video. Wala pong
What
sounds.
should I do?
Oo.
What should I do?
Nakaano po ba yung yung parang volume ng dito yung YouTube?
Hang on. Yeah, I think it's in full.
Full.
It's in full.
Sige lang po, ano lang po natin kasi kanina wala po kasing wala siyang audio.
Wala siyang audio.
Yes po.
Okay. Should I try it again?
Pa,
You hear it now? No, there's no.
wala pa din. Wala pa din siyang
What's
audio.
happening?
Baka hindi po na-share yung audio niyo, ma'am. Yung kasama po siya i-share yung audio.
Ah, okay. So I should have. But if I play it right from my screen, they can just hear me, right?
Yes.
Okay. I can well do that. Hang on. I'm sorry about that. What about that? Can you hear it now, Maureen?
We cannot hear it pa rin, Ma'am Chanda. I think
What
may
about that?
problem.
So you can still.
Yes po.
Okay. All right.
Parang may technical
So,
problem lang siguro po. Maybe we can proceed na lang po sa next,
okay.
Parang hindi
Yeah.
talaga siya nag-play, Doc Chanda. Yung nag-ano yung audio eh.
Hang on. I know what I can do. Do you want me to just simply proceed? Okay.
Millions of students.
No, it's not working. Okay. Now let me proceed to my next. So all right. Now what I can do is to show you my own flipped classroom. So basically the idea is that you have a virtual classroom where you put all the content, all your resources. And of course, you'll have some worksheets as assignments. So students can work on them on their own. And when they come to class, what you do is to simply, like affirm what they have done. Are they right? Or, whatever areas in their assignment that they need to strengthen. And sometimes you can group them according to abilities, and then you can focus as a teacher. You can then help your students who are, we call them less able. So here's an example of a flipped classroom. So this is my Google Classroom for my year 13. So we put all our resources here. Okay. And students study all of these resources at home or out of class. And then I'll show you like an example of a worksheet that we give them. Now, one important aspect of our learning intentions in New Zealand is to develop among our students the ability to analyze and to cite implications of a particular context or a particular idea. And the topic for this worksheet is what Catholics and secular humanists believe on life after death and the purpose of man. Okay, now I have to show you again my flipped classroom. So in there are lectures, videos of lectures. We curate videos from YouTube, and there are thousands of them that you can use in your lessons. We use TED Talks, there are sites in the UK, in Australia, in New Zealand, in the US, where teachers, or sometimes Ministry of Education itself, they would come up with, like learning tools, which would include clips and videos that are relevant to, to whatever subject you have in your curriculum, like RE, for example. Okay, we have the 3-minute catechisms. We have videos from I can't remember the site of Bishop Robert Barron, but I have him in my library. And so students would watch them, and we give them worksheets such as this one. Actually, it's just reflection, their opinion. And so we give them questions. So in here, students, and Isaac here is one of my diligent student. He's one of the diligent students, and he's also coming from the high ability, from a high ability class. And here's his reflection. So he watched the videos and work on this, teacher designed worksheets. And this is not the essay that they're coming up with. This is just an exercise of, like how they're going to evaluate and criticize each of the beliefs of both Catholics and secular humanists. Okay, I'll take you back to I'm supposed to show you some videos so that you'll have an idea of I'll try this video.
Ma'am Chanda, ano ko po yung screen niyo, ma'am, tapos i-share niyo po ulit para ma-share niyo yung audio. I will exit niyo muna po sa sharing screen.
Okay.
Okay, and then share it again, share your screen again. And then paglabas po ng screen, may ano po sa ibaba, share computer audio. Paki-check po yun. Once you have clicked the share screen,
yeah.
And then at the bottom po, may i-check po kayo dyan. Share computer.
Advanced sharing options?
Hindi po. Yung share screen, pag-click po niyan.
Yeah.
Tapos, meron po tayo sa bottom left.
Oh,
may
share computer sound.
Yan.
Yeah.
And then click that one po.
Okay. Should I show you what flipped classroom again is about?
Yes po, pwede po. Sige po.
Okay. The flipped classroom model.
Teaching that is turning the flipped classroom is a new method of teaching that is turning the traditional classroom on its head. Thousands of teachers deliver the exact same lesson in class to millions of students. Every night, millions of students sit over the exact same homework, trying to figure out how to solve it. The flipped classroom is turning this upside down. Traditionally, students listen to lectures and take tests in class, and read textbooks and work on problem sets at home. In flipped teaching, students first study the topic by themselves, typically using video lessons on YouTube, and then apply the knowledge by solving problems and doing practical work in class. Modern schools who flipped their classroom report many benefits. 1. It allows all students to learn at their own pace, as videos can be watched again. 2. It's more efficient, as students enter the classroom prepared to contribute. 3. It enriches the classroom, as more time can be spent on group work and projects. 4. Doing homework in class allows students to help each other, which benefits both the advanced and less advanced learners. Flipping also brings changes for teachers. Traditionally, teachers engage most with the confident students who ask questions. Flipping allows teachers to target the students who really need help instead of just those who are confident. Also, instead of instructing from the front, teachers guide on the side. This allows them to work more closely with individuals or small groups. Teachers that are not great presenters can use third-party videos to explain the concept and focus on methods of teaching that suit their style, such as project work or experiments. Once video lectures are made available online, teachers don't need to give the same lecture over and over again. Again, they gain more time to focus on the needs of their class. Many scholars also argue that the flipped classroom model promotes equal learning opportunities, as all kids get the same attention when doing their homework. Currently, kids with caring parents, older siblings at home, or expensive private tutors have a clear advantage over those who don't. Let us know what you think. If you were a teacher, tell us if this model would be possible in your classroom. If you were a student, let us know if you would prefer learning in a flipped classroom.
Yeah, I think he's explained that a lot better than how I have explained it. But anyway, this is an example of a flip classroom. And I think I have made mention of one of my students, like Isaac. Isaac is an A student. Using flip classroom, I don't have to worry about Isaac. He can work on his own, and he can just come and see me if he needs to. And so I have more time to work with students who are struggling, who are not as articulate as Isaac. And during the lockdown, my online classes were for students who had questions about the tasks, and for those who were adept at understanding the big words used in the videos. So I had to simplify the discussions for them. Now I wonder, when you do the online teaching, I wonder if you can do the same. Now I have 3 periods a week for each class. During the lockdown, I narrowed it down to just 1 period per week that I required everyone to show up, and they would, take turns in updating me on their progress or raise any issues or any difficulties encountered in accomplishing tasks. Now, the high ability students were comfortable on their own, so they worked independently, and the students who needed more help stayed with me online. The second and the third period of the week, I had one-on-one or small group mentoring, and the ones who wanted to and the ones who wanted to do that with me would email me a day ahead or early morning. On days when no one signed up, I stayed online, and anyone who got questions just swung by into my Google Classroom and asked me questions as if I were there with them physically. So that's how I made this work, the flipped classroom work, during the lockdown. Now, I don't think, by experience, I don't think it's possible that you can meet your students, using your timetable, the schedule, like we call it timetable here. I don't know how you call it, I can't remember the term that you use, but I don't think you can do the timetable classes because it didn't work for us here. And to think our internet is really fast. Just imagine we have like around 60 classes, 60 rooms in our college, and we can simultaneously play, or use YouTube clips or show a film stream, from the internet, and there's no problem. That's how fast our fiber, our internet connection is. I wonder if it would work in the Philippines, having to meet your classes every timetable period. And so we did away with that. Instead, we choose one class per week, one period per week to meet our whole class, and the rest it was just like by small groups or one-on-one mentoring. Now another app that I would like to share to you is the HyperDocs. This is not a puzzle. Before I move to the HyperDocs, now here's another app that you can use. It's called Edpuzzle. Okay, it's 100% free for teachers and students. One can store up to 20 videos in your account. So what's an Edpuzzle? It's an app that you can use to create videos. In my Google Classroom, in my flipped classroom, I don't use my own video. I curate as much videos as I can and organize them in my Google Classroom. Some of my co-teachers would do that. I'm very self-conscious, so I don't record myself. I love selfies, but I don't record myself teaching or discussing something and lessons. I don't do that. But maybe some of you can and would be willing, would be interested. That is if you're articulate enough. Well, I am not. I have to have notes in front of me in order to be sensible and be understood. Now, we have here a guide on how to, start an Edpuzzle. Now, probably what you can do is just take note of the website, the edpuzzle.com, and just Google on how to getting started with Edpuzzle. Okay. So you can make a lesson, you can edit video content, you can, access scrap options. You can also add audio track. You could add quiz questions, open-ended, and you can also have text comments. Okay. So that this is one of the apps that may be useful for you. Now, another app that I want you to use would be a Padlet. This is good for recitation. That is, recitation is if it's still part of your grading system. Okay. So here's an example of a Padlet. Now I want you to take note of the website. It's called padlet.com. And you can create like a Padlet. I think at least 3 for an account. If it's a free account, you can create 3 Padlets. So what's a Padlet? Okay. Now, this is an example of a Padlet. Now I have asked my students to like sort of brainstorm on the limitations of, again, the Catholic perspective on life after death. And I grouped them into 4. And each group would answer a particular question. Let's have this class, red 1, for example. Okay, so this is a question for their group, the Catholic perspective in life after death. What are its limitations and why? Please defend your points clearly and in a thorough manner. So I have students here contributed to the discussion. Okay, and in a way, they've like, you know, debated with each other, but through written texts. Okay. And in the good thing about this app is that you can approve or delete a comment. Now, this, for example, okay, Shebin, for example, doesn't make sense really. So I did not approve his posting. And I have not deleted it either. So, and it's like a post-it, it's like a whiteboard that you just, students can just post their ideas. And if it's like 10%, if the recitation is 10% or 15% of your grading system, then this could be a good way for you to, you know, to carry on with that grading system and use Padlet. And allow students to express themselves. And all you need to do is just come up with engaging questions. Okay, that's one. Now I have in my blurb, I said I'm going to, you know, introduce using Facebook as a learning tool. I don't think I have the time to do that. 2 days before this webinar, I was told that many of you are into Google Suite. And so all of the things that I've used here are, what's the word that I should use? They're suitable to use in a Google Suite setting. And because my school is also using that system. Okay, now another app that you could use is Jamboard. And this is part of Google Suite. And Jamboard is like a whiteboard where students can just stick notes. Again, you can use this for brainstorming, when you negotiate meaning and you want to scaffold it with, you know, with students, you can use this. Again, you can also use this for recitation purposes, like grading them. And I want you to take note of its name. It's called Jamboard. And you can just Google it. And it's built in Google Suite. Now we also have what we call a HyperDocs. Okay. All right. Now here's an example of a colleague using Edpuzzle or Screencastify to record herself and sort of present something to the staff. And it's all about HyperDocs. And I will show this to you just for the HyperDocs part. It's a long video, 4 minutes, but I will show you how her name is Rachel Peak, explained to us teachers. This was like some months ago.
Hello staff, I just wanted to show you some really quick, easy to use tools that some of the teachers are using and I've started using myself. So this is just 4 easy tools to utilise, and information is in the PLD remote learning folder for you. HyperDocs is something that Navan showed us at a workshop earlier on in the term, and it's something that's super easy to use and also quite engaging. So here on this particular website, you just have to log in and you can get some very easy, nice basic templates. They're there, they're free, they're simple to use, and instructions are all there for you. If you need more instructions though, Navan has put in the remote teaching folder information about what HyperDocs look like, what you can do with them, and obviously different ways to engage the students. It's a simple, really effective tool and just might add some of that.
Okay. Now HyperDocs is like a lesson plan, but shared to the students. And in there are videos, links of videos, and activities that you share. It's like a class. It's like a class again, but it's more of like a lesson plan given to a class, and the students can just link. And activities are prepared for them. Okay. Now, let me move on to the next part of my talk, and it's all about, I think this is the heart of my sharing, really, my insights on online learning and distance learning. Now, I am in New Zealand. It's a developed country. We are known to be really good when it comes to educating our young people for the future. And yet we also are one of the most inequitable educational systems among OECD countries. Now, this disparity was clearly amplified during the lockdown. Our government tried hard to provide resources to students. The Ministry of Education provided computers to 23,000 students. That's 40,000 short of the 70,000 students needing them. There were like 20,000 internet connections with a 6-month free internet package given to low-income families. But there were 51,000 households needing them. Clearly, thousands of students were put at a disadvantage. Now, is it their fault? No. Now, what scares me is the fact that online learning would alienate students from low-income families and communities more than ever. And to think we are in New Zealand. In the Philippines, for example, how are schools addressing this problem? What will happen to students who do not have the devices? Millions struggle to send their children to colleges, and now on top of that, they have to fork out money for internet connection. Now, do you have the infrastructure ready for online learning? I was almost moved to tears when I saw in the news that teachers, I think these are teachers from Mako, Davao del Norte, had to camp out on the highways of Davao del Norte just to get a signal to attend a webinar. That to me was very heartbreaking. Now, you all have these webinars and training to equip teachers, and maybe your schools have purchased online management systems. But can all students access them? I understand that you are trying to produce modules, and I imagine you would send them out, but would they really bridge the gap, or would they widen the disparity even more? If that is the case, That in itself is a form of injustice. Now, we do not live in a perfect world, so the challenge really is how would you as a teacher bridge the gap and the inequity? Now, this phase, I call it a phase, okay, having experience online teaching at its full, okay, I don't think we can continue like this, okay? That's why I call it a phase. In the long run, you have to face the reality of your students who are not just learners, but young people who have their own difficulties, inabilities, and personal predicaments, on top of what is already a very unfamiliar way of life. I hope you will be reasonable, not from your vantage point, but from the students. Now, I think I have mentioned to you, I hope I have been able to sort of enlighten you on teaching as an inquiry, but I hope you would practice it. Ask students how they can learn better from you. Inquire about their predicaments and talk about what is most confronting to them. Ask about what is most confronting to them, about your way of teaching, the materials you give them, amount of work you expect from them, and the present system. And then you as a teacher make the necessary adjustments. I have taught at all educational levels, from primary to graduate school. If there is one wisdom that holds true for me all these years, is this, that as a teacher, it is my job to first and foremost provide my students the condition to learn. And I think it all begins with the right relationship. As a teacher, you do not live in a bubble. Now more than ever, you need to collaborate with your colleagues. Inquire and ask what worked for them and what didn't. If you are coming from an affluent college, reach out to small colleges that are definitely struggling at this time. Share whatever resources you have developed or found in the internet. It is also a part of your responsibility to look after the ones who have less. If you are a head of department, look after those teachers who are struggling to use technology. This is indeed the most difficult time for them because they are vulnerable to all sorts of criticisms from students and colleagues alike. Be kind and give them the guidance they need. Politics have no place at this time. If you are as helpless as them, seek help from the more abled colleagues, technology-wise. The other day, I mentioned to our Director of Digital Learning and Innovation, his name is Navin Kumar. I mentioned to him this webinar, and he gladly offered me his slides and said, please don't stress. Choose from among my PowerPoint presentations. Everything is there. Why reinvent the wheel? I've also mentioned this webinar engagement to Rachel Peak, our assistant headmaster in charge of professional development, and asked if I could use the resources we have in the college share drive. And she was so generous, telling me to use whatever I need for this webinar. So my parting word is this to all of you: life is already difficult. Don't make it even hard, especially at this time. Thank you, and kia kaha, colleagues.
Thank you, ma'am, for that interesting talk. Don't you love hearing Ma'am Chanda's accent? I do. I know you have some questions. Feel free to type in your questions in our chat box, and I'll read them later during our Q&A after the second session. But before we move on to our second session, let me award this certificate of recognition to Ma'am Chanda first. Allow me to read the citations. This certificate of recognition is hereby awarded to Dr. Maria Chanda Gado-Antoque for generously sharing her expertise and time as the resource person during the conduct of CHED 11 webinar number 7 with the topic the use of engaging strategies and apps in blended learning, and insight into my experience in New Zealand among the administrators and faculty of higher education institutions in Region 11, held on July 16, 2020, via Zoom, Facebook, and YouTube live streaming. Issued the 16th day of July 2020, Davao City, Philippines. Signed, Dr. Maricar R. Casquejo, CHED Regional 11 Director.
Thank you,
Thank you
Dr.
once again, Ma'am Chanda.
Thank you. My pleasure. Thank you.
Moving on to our second session, it's about embedding pedagogy and blending edtech solutions in the learning design of a virtual classroom, a portfolio of good practices. The objectives of this session are as follows. One, to discuss strengths and challenges of different modalities of flexible learning, to identify pedagogical challenges of managing learning elements of a virtual classroom, to explain an instructional design model for remote digital delivery, to demonstrate some edtech solutions to meet pedagogical challenges, and to share insights on virtual teaching experience. Our second speaker has taught in various higher education institutions in Asia, the Middle East, and the USA. He is a certified professional teacher and is currently working overseas as a professor in the Royal Polytechnic of Bahrain. He has extensive sets of academic publication portfolio in the national and international levels. His current international publications include Doing Academic Research with Ease, 5 Basic Methods Every Novice Researcher Should Know, and 5 Techniques for Effective Essay Writing, a simplified handbook for beginners. Both titles are available live on Amazon Kindle in ebook and paperback formats. His current research interests are content and language integration learning, evidence based teaching, and pedagogy in virtual learning environment. He is a fellow of Advanced Higher Education Academy of the United Kingdom. Please help me welcome Dr. Carlo Domingo Casinto.
Hi. Thank you, Dr. Maureen. Thank you to your team, to Dr. Randy Gamboa, to the leadership of the Commission on Higher Education 11, Dr. Maricar Casquejo. Thank you for the opportunity given to me to share good practices in virtual teaching here in this webinar series. I understand this is the 7th, and that must be a lucky number for all of us, okay? I thank you all for signing up your interest to the session today, and I hope that in the next 1 hour or so, I'll be able to meet your expectation. Now, speaking of expectation, this is what I got for you in the menu today. My apology for those who have not taken their lunch or dinner yet, wherever you are in this part of the world, because this menu sounds like a gastronomic experience. Sorry for making you hungrier. So here's the menu. I will begin with the word cloud activity and proceed to discuss the modalities, the challenges, and the recommended responses based on stakeholders' approach of flexible learning. Then I will move on to discuss how the learning elements of pedagogy can be managed and embedded. And that's the keyword we have to remember for today's session, embedded, okay? How to embed in an instructional design of a virtual class, utilizing learning management platforms and educational technology applications. So that's what you can expect from the session today. It's a heartful servings of what works in a virtual classroom. This session is, after all, sharing about good practices, but however, I would encourage you to be discerning when you do that, because as what the proverb says, you can't plant an apple tree and expect it to bear fruit in any soil or in any topography. So you have to be deliberate on what new practices to adopt for your school, for your college, for your university. So that's my little disclaimer in this menu, all right? So let's start with the appetizer. Here's a word cloud activity using Mentimeter. I know you're familiar with it by now. This is a free app. It's not proprietary. You can use this for your class for warming up activity or those activities that arouse your students' interest or that stimulate activation of prior knowledge and experience for your students. So here, I need you to tell me what word or phrase comes to mind when you hear the term pedagogy. You can either scan the QR code as shown on your screen right now, or you can type menti.com and enter the code that I will show you later, and then key in your answer, okay? So let's have 2 minutes for this activity. So I'll just have to move to my screen and show you the code so that you can enter your answers. So let me just do that. Here you go. All right. So the code is 851447. Again, I repeat, 851447. Go to menti.com, enter the code, and tell me what word or phrase comes to mind when you hear the term pedagogy. All right, tell me, go ahead. Come on. All right, so words are coming in. So I'm seeing now learning, teaching young learners, child learning, manner of teaching. All right, keep going, carry on. Interesting words, huh? All right, art of teaching. All right, opportunity, framework. All right, that's quite a heavy word. Okay, 1 more minute. Come on, carry on. Approach, methods, okay? Oh, someone answered pedagogy as well. You're just repeating the term. Education, teaching, learning. All right, 30 seconds, ladies and gentlemen. All right. Okay, so I'm sorry I had to stop you there. I need to go to the main slide and process what we have just done. Let me just go to the main slide. Let me just go back there. Okay, here we go. Just continue feeding your answer. Okay, all right. So apparently we have our top 4 words, as you can see there. Those are the words that have the highest similarity with other responses. You can see that these words are highlighted with bigger text at the middle of our word cloud. And I don't think this is surprising, actually, to be honest, okay? Why? Because most of us are from the academe and are very much familiar with the term in our own academic context. Nonetheless, ladies and gentlemen, your responses are indications of your working knowledge of pedagogy, be it in a physical or in a virtual classroom. And that's a good thing to note, actually. All right, so let's first acknowledge that we are currently in an extraordinary situation. And I don't think you will argue with me on that. We are, in fact, in the middle of a global pandemic. This is unprecedented event in our lifetime and across a number of generations, I would say. In fact, if you would ask an 80-year-old grandmother about pandemic, outrightly, she would tell you that in her lifetime, she has not experienced such health crisis of such scale. Now, in the context of the business of education, which is actually our business, our profession at the same time, a lot of us are caught off guard and flat-footed. Even if our schools have existing learning management system, even if our colleges and our universities have prepositioned learning management system, the teaching and the learning requirements amid COVID-19 are simply huge and overwhelming. And this experience would make us realize that yes, indeed we are navigating through unfamiliar terrain right now, which may sound like a cliche for many of us, but it doesn't mean that we are in a dead-end road. No, we are not. Okay, we are not in a dead-end road like nowhere to go. On the contrary, we are constantly moving on a vast, open, unexplored field which is a field full of untapped opportunities, both for our teaching and learning. However, the challenge there remains. And what is this challenge? The challenge of navigation, or moving to the right direction in order to arrive to our intended destination. And this is the destination of where learning outcomes of our classes, of our courses, are achieved successfully. And this is where I believe personally that pedagogy and learning design will help us through as a navigational tool, as a compass in this journey. So what is then the new normal? And why do we need to recalibrate our teaching? According to the WHO, in one of their media statements recently, there are 5 behavioral modification indicators that would be a telltale that we are in transition to the new normal. And these are: 1, physical social distancing. Do we have that? Yes. Okay. 2nd, contactless transactions. Do we have that? Definitely, we have that now. 3rd, limited or no face-to-face meetings. Do we have that? Definitely, we also have that now. 4th, work, learn from home. What we're doing now is actually that. We're working and learning from home. So yes, that's a big yes. And 5, only essential movements are allowed. Ladies and gentlemen, it is clearly evident that we are transitioning to the new normal, aren't we? The answer can be observed around you, can be observed around us. Depending on our context, 1 or 2 or 3 of these behavioral modification indicators are most likely have been revolving in our definition of teaching and learning environment. Personally, I believe that the old normal is already a water under the bridge. So here are the modalities of flexible learnings in response to the new normal. So has your college or university chosen any one of these? At an outset, let me tell you that this is not an exclusive list. A hybrid form or a combination of 2 or 3 of these modalities may emerge over time. It's imperative that the prime consideration when deciding on the modality is to look into our learners' internet connectivity status. That's the prime consideration. By connectivity, I don't just mean ease of access to the internet, but also on the reliability, stability, and quality of transmission. So these are the indicators. So when we look at the different connectivity status of our learners in the second column on the table as shown on the screen right now, I can recommend the following modalities. If the internet connectivity status of your learner is low, you can either go for modular, the traditional print, or you can have a hybrid form, which is actually what others call on stick. It's actually an electronic module on USB. That's why others call it on stick. Or you can go for blended modality. You blend, you combine your module with an analog media like a radio or a TV. Or if there's a limited connectivity, you can either have, you can blend your module, be it print or electronic, with a partial digital technology. When I say partial digital technology, you deliver it virtually, but there is no need for a synchronous delivery. Synchronous means live delivery. That can be blended okay, when the connectivity status is limited, okay? On the other hand, if your learner's connectivity status is high, then you can go for full digital, meaning you can deliver all your lessons synchronously and asynchronously. Synchronously, the simplest term for that is live delivery, and asynchronous is recorded delivery. And of course, it's what Dr. Chanda has just mentioned earlier, okay? Another option for a high connectivity status is to deliver your lesson using the PLEAT modality or PLEAT classroom. But however, this is not one of our options on the table right now for obvious reason that we are not yet allowed. We are in the middle of the pandemic and we're not yet allowed to do face-to-face interaction with our students, okay? However, for purposes of discussion, I will discuss all these modalities, their strengths, okay? The areas of contention, but I will focus more on my discussion on the virtual modality, okay? So now let's look into the perceived challenges of modular modality and the recommended calibrated responses of each stakeholder. First, let me just make this clear that personally, this is my personal declaration anyway, I'm not, to be honest about it, I'm not a fan of a standalone modular modality. The reason for that is obviously the one that I just highlighted now, okay? The major challenge, one of the major challenges of option one, modular modality, is that it is low in all aspects of pedagogical elements. Again, I'm talking on the pedagogical perspective, okay? It is low in interaction, it is low in collaboration, and it is low in feedback, okay? So that's the main challenge here. How do we address this challenge? Maybe you can convert that to electronic module, as I've said earlier, and able to address or neutralize at least some of these threats, okay, to a sound pedagogical delivery of this modality. The other challenge that I have to mention is how you produce your instructional materials. Remember that teachers are not trained to be content writer. Teachers, again, I repeat, are not trained to be content writers, to be content designers or instructional designers or content editors, okay? So that is one actually gap that administrators and even regulators have to look at seriously into right now. They have to take that into account. How do you train and build the capability and the capacity of your teachers who will be producing this instructional materials? Because there are factors to consider. One, it has first that when you are producing instructional materials, you have to ensure that your prototype for that follows a sound instructional design. And I will discuss that in details in a bit. And also the other consideration that you have to take into account is that when you produce your IM, okay, or instructional materials, ensure that content, learning activities, and assessments together are constructively aligned. That's the key word. There's constructive alignment, okay? And not only the three elements should be constructively aligned, but also with the external regulators. And I'm talking about the competencies that the government has prescribed, like DepEd has their own competencies. Also, CHED has also prescribed its own competencies. So you have to consider this. So ideally, when we look at this, the role of the teacher here in modality number one, option number one, is that there's no teaching after all. So they are actually dedicated workforce to produce instructional materials, okay? So teachers under this modality, I would say, virtually do not teach. And that's another challenge that we have to look into that seriously, okay? So that's the first modality, okay? Now let's look at the second modality, okay? Now, unlike the first modality, which is modular, blended has somehow, to some extent, able to neutralize the challenge of having the pedagogical elements there of interaction, collaboration, and feedback, okay? To some extent, the interaction and collaboration and feedback in a blended modality is at least average, okay? All right? So what are the other challenges here? The other challenge is how you actually produce, again, instructional materials and make it not only constructively aligned with the prescribed competencies, but also making sure that all your materials for blended instruction, be it in an analog media or be it in a digital partial media, should synchronize with each other. Okay, synchronization is the key in a blended instruction. How do you synchronize? Because all materials cannot operate in isolation. They have to blend. That's why it's called blending, because there is synchronization. All the materials you got there should be in sync with each other. Okay. And the other challenge that you have to also look at is how you sustain this synchronization of materials. Because when you say we are into blended, but you only do that once a month or even twice or once a week, that is not blended at all. Okay, sustaining blended sessions on a weekly basis is also another strategic response to this challenge. Okay, now, again, as I've said, since practically here, we don't meet your students virtually, so the response, the role of the teacher here again is still on producing materials, creating them. Okay, plus the fact that they might, to some extent, be asked to also deliver it, okay, in an analog media or in a partial digital media. So there is some extent of delivery this time, unlike the pure modular instruction, when there is virtually no teaching at all. All right. And also, I'd like to point out that maybe here, the parents will be happy to note that their involvement will not that very high. Okay, but again, parents are still expected to be involved in the distance education of their children. You cannot simply, take them out of this equation. Okay, whatever is the modality, the parents' involvement should always be there. Okay, this is actually true more for young learners. Okay, now let's go to the third modality, and as I've said, this is the focus of my the session today. I still see the pedagogical elements there to be a challenge, although it is high in interaction. Virtual delivery, virtual modality is characterized by its high interaction, collaboration, and feedback. So pedagogically speaking, we don't have any problem, but I see it as a challenge. Why? Because sustaining virtual delivery in terms of producing asynchronous and synchronous materials, integrating the right educational technology application into the learning design, formulating new policies in order for your virtual classroom to work. When you take this into account, that can become a challenge, not only for the teachers, but also for the administrators. So what is the ideal response that we should have here? First, you have to sustain your asynchronous and synchronous delivery on a weekly basis. Do not forget that this is now virtual delivery. So you got to have a live and a recorded session. And the other one is that you also have to synchronize all your materials. Again, just like in the blended modality earlier, you cannot have a different sets of material for your live session and a different set of materials for your recorded session. No, they have to flow coherently. There must be cohesiveness. There must be synchronization, okay, with all the materials that you deliver, be it synchronous or asynchronous. And I see that as a challenge, okay? But you can actually convert that challenge as a strategic response. And the other thing that I cannot overemphasize in a virtual delivery of learning is that you have, I'm calling this as for administrators, okay? I'm making this call to administrators that you have to establish a dynamic learning support 24/7, okay? Not only for your learners, but also for the parents who will be assisting the learners at home, and more equally, your teachers as well, okay? So learning support is a must, okay? It's non-negotiable. It has to be there. It's indispensable component of a virtual modality. Okay. And also, if you can look at the role of the teacher now, the teachers will be teaching. Okay. The teacher will be in the truest sense of the word in the profession. They will now be teachers, although the difference this time is they deliver their lessons virtually. Okay. But the teachers now do not just create content, do not just design lesson, but also more importantly, they have to deliver that, okay, in their virtual classroom. So we see now teachers really acting like teachers, okay? And for administrators, I would say that when you choose virtual modality as your mode of instructional delivery, take advantage of the opportunity for your institution to, you know, produce, okay, instructional materials that is actually based on the real actual needs of your students. So therefore you can actually plant on the idea that these are instructional materials that are research-based. And for me, personally, in our university, we see that as a strategic response that can strengthen the research and the production function of your college or your university. Okay, and eventually you can go for accreditation in the international, you know, with the international board. For example, you have for business, we have ABET, for example, and for teaching, you have quality management, QM, if you're familiar, okay? The other thing that I would like to point out with modality option number 3 is that when you talk of instructional materials here in EdTech applications, we're not just talking about the usual web tools and application that we see usually on a webinar, okay? But I'm talking about those applications also that are considered to be immersive learning solutions. Like, for example, augmented reality, okay? And virtual reality for laboratory-based classes. You know, AR or augmented reality and VR, the virtual reality, these are the immersive learning tools that provide interaction and collaboration and simulation for laboratory activities. And in our university, we have done that. Okay, I'll show you how we have pilot tested that particular tool in a bit. Okay, but I'm just trying to tell, I'm just trying to make it the point that that can be one of the options when you are talking about your portfolio of EdTech application that you have to consider when you design your virtual learning. All right. And finally, let's look into the perceived challenges of flipped modality. This is what Dr. Chanda discussed to you at length earlier. The challenge here is that this modality is very high in interaction, collaboration, and feedback. And I think, as I've said earlier, this is a positive challenge because it requires a lot, okay? In terms of instructional materials design, in terms of educational technology that you would put into the system of your learning design, and even formulating new policies to go with your flipped modality or flipped classroom. But let me just tell you this. The essence of teaching can be seen here. Although again, as I've said, let me just emphasize on that. This is not one of our options that we're considering right now, but who knows, in the post-pandemic era, okay, maybe you will say, thank you, COVID-19, because we got to learn about flipped classroom, okay? It's an opportunity to learn it because here, maybe in the post-pandemic era, we might as well consider it because in a flipped classroom, you are actually giving the opportunity to your students to work on a higher level thinking skills or HATS, okay? When you're familiar with Bloom's taxonomy, there are low level thinking skills and there is also high level thinking skills. So again, as what mentioned by Dr. Chanda earlier, so first session, students will go online, okay, for their e-learning, and they will work on the low level thinking skills. And eventually when they go to the classroom, they will be working on the high level thinking skills. And that to me is actually what the essence of teaching, okay? And the essence of active learning is there because it's no longer what our students know, but what our students can do with what they know, which of course really matters in the fourth industrial revolution era, okay? All right, now, so this is how we carry on with our virtual delivery. As I've said, I will focus on modality number 3, the virtual classroom, okay? So in the university where I'm currently teaching, this is how we carry on with our virtual delivery. And what resources are required, I will tell you exactly here. And this is the first set of good practices that I am sharing with you, okay? So the virtual delivery in our university takes 2 modalities that complement and synergize each other. As I've said, they do not work in isolation. So first, you have the synchronous. Here, students learn in real time. It is live session. They learn at the same time. It is believed to be more engaging since it allows students instant feedback and clarification on the spot, okay? It is similar to actual school schedule in which students have daily routine. So students here will not feel like, oh, I'm to homeschool again, okay? So I can just, you know, sleep late at night. No, if virtual schooling is there, they have to follow a regular schedule. So you have to really tell your children that there is a routine that they have to do every day, okay? Like the real classroom routine that they are familiar with, okay? On the other hand, asynchronous is not live, okay? Students learn and review at different time, at their own convenience, and at their own pace. Therefore, okay, more flexible. But students here may be given a time frame, usually a week window, to access materials once or twice. So here in the Bahrain Polytechnic University, every week we deliver 2 sessions, okay, that combine synchronous live and asynchronous recorded recorded session using a combination of Moodle, Big Blue Button, and OneDrive platforms. This results to what I have coined as a hybrid fleet classroom. Why? Because the synchronous session here takes the place of the traditional face-to-face interaction. Yet, despite that, okay, there is still the challenge of ensuring the quality of teaching, which means that virtual teaching has to have a sound pedagogical foundation, okay? Why is that? You might ask me, because I believe that in virtual teaching, only the medium or the channel has changed, which is the integration of technology, obviously. Virtual teaching in itself is still a form of teaching that has to have a defined learning process. It being such, it requires a pedagogy or the mechanism by which learning is to be carried out. So at this point, let me give you a walkthrough of our LMS Moodle and its different features. Moodle is our LMS, our main learning platform for asynchronous session, for our recorded session. It is, in fact, a repository of our lessons, activities, and assessments, as you can see. Here, as you see in the page layout of our contents, it is important that the contents in your LMS, when you are thinking of Moodle or Google Classroom, or maybe Blackboard or Edmodo, for example, as your LMS, the main consideration that you have to have when you put your contents there is that there must be an ease of access. What does it mean? That students can navigate your page easily, okay? The litmus test of how user-friendly your LMS should be is, again, I repeat, the ease of access. So in the example here, okay, we have our contents in audio-narrated PowerPoint. So when, for example, a student access our Moodle page in that particular week, we have our contents in audio-narrated PowerPoint. How is it done? I think you can ask someone to help you produce one, because here this is actually a PowerPoint with a voiceover. Okay, so you cannot just simply put in there a PowerPoint with no narration at all. It has to have a narration. Okay, in fact, this file is an MP4 in a video format. Okay, so in that way, although this is not live session, at least your students will hear the teacher's voice, the professor's voice in the learning materials that they're accessing to. Okay, so that narrated PowerPoint is actually in MP4 format. as well as we also provided them other version or other formats of the material. Like for example, we have it also in PDF version, okay? Because we have students who prefer not to watch video, but they would just rather read it by themselves during their convenient time, okay? Because you have some students who are working students, okay? So we also have our Moodle quiz over there. And remember, as I've said, that it is that particular activity that will enable your student to interact with content, okay? And also give them feedback instantly, okay? And of course, you have the forum to respond to students' inquiries, okay? But make sure that it's properly moderated, because some students would just any questions out of the blue. So it has to make sure that the questions there should have something to do with their lessons, of course. So definitely you'll end up answering open-ended questions that have no relevance at all to academics, okay? Now, embedded as a plugin in our Moodle page is a Moodle quiz. As you can see now, this is actually what I've showed you earlier. So when the students click on the link here on the quiz, that will take them to this page, okay? And the thing that I like on Moodle quiz is that, as you can see, it can auto-generate feedback. It will tell your students if their answer is right or wrong. And if their answer is wrong, it will explain why it is wrong. If their answer is right, then why it is right. And not only that, it also auto-generate the scores, the row score and the percentage score. So that's one good thing that you can provide to your students, so that there will be somehow, to some extent, in a synchronous session, there is some sort of interaction between the learner and the content, okay? This is Turnitin, okay? This is a plugin, a web tool plugin embedded in our Moodle LMS. We use this for processing submitted reports and assessments, okay? It's actually, the simple name that I would have to describe this web tool plugin is that this is a plagiarism checker, okay? It's a plagiarism checker. This is an app that tells professors, teachers, if submitted work is original or not, or is it plagiarized, okay? And if it is plagiarized, then how much of it is plagiarized, okay? And where it is copied from, okay? So all of this information are directly given to you using this web tool. And in our university, we have the policy that if the plagiarism similarity rate is more than 60%, that raises the red flag to us, then we will investigate and scrutinize where the similarity rating is coming from. And if it's more than 95%, automatically that student will get a 0 in the assessment. So these are applications and web tools that you can, embed in your learning management platform in order for you to have, at least to sustain assessment integrity in your well, of course, in your tests and exams, okay, or projects, all right? Now, this next application or web tool plugin that I'm showing you is Text Inspector. This is how we prepare all assessments. If in the pre-moderation of the assessment, we run all texts, okay, in this web tool, and we check if the text that the students will engage with are relevant to its level. So, for example, in our university, the entry level of our students in the CEFR. I don't know if you're familiar with that. For language teachers, you must be familiar of CEFR. It's the Common European Framework for Languages. So, for example, our entry level is B1, and we expect our students to exit the course at C1, okay? And then we run our document to this application. If it is C1 level, then that reading text or listening text that the students will interact with is suited for his level. If it is not, if it is lower than C1, then we discard the text. Then we tell the assessment creator, please look for another text, or maybe tweak the text in order that it can be at the level where we expect our students to exit, okay, the target exit level. On the other hand, conversely speaking, when the text for reading or for listening would be higher than the target level, say for example C2 or even higher, then we also tell the assessment creator to also tweak or discard the text and look for another one that can also be at the level. So this is actually being fair to the students, because you cannot just give them a reading or a listening audio text that is higher than what is expected for them to reach when the in the learning outcome that their course is designed for. Okay, so this one is, I think, proprietary. This is not a pre-app, but should in case you go for negotiate, okay, with the LMS provider, you might as well ask for text inspector. Okay, now one of the things that I like in our plugins in the LMS is OneDrive, because OneDrive is pretty much like your Google document, by the way. This is the app that we use, that I and my students use when we extend collaborative work from our live session. And if I feel that there is a need for the students to extend the work at home, then I use OneDrive. Okay, pretty much the same with your Google document. Here in the OneDrive, students in the same group can access remotely together a document, and they can collaboratively write, edit, revise, and give feedback from each other's contribution, okay? Be it a project or a research work. And as you can see on the screen right now, there is a sample group proposal report which my students have drafted together through an exchange of feedback and counter feedback, okay? You can also need to set guidelines and decorum when they are there, but this is what I love in OneDrive, because students can follow through my feedback, and at the same time they can give feedback with each other. So for example, here, as you can see, a student named Samia was saying that, hey, Mariam, you did not write you did not give the right input for this particular section in our report. And Mariam said, oh, I didn't realize that. It's my fault, mea culpa. So that's the beauty there. When your students are interacting and collaborating, that of course promotes all the pedagogical elements that we were saying earlier about virtual learning. Okay, at this point also, let me show you before I play the video, this is, as I've said earlier, one of the portfolio in terms of immersive learning applications. And this is actually used as a pilot test app in our engineering program. It's called, the software is actually, or the application is a virtual reality. I'll tell you what the outcome of the pilot test is, but let us just see for a few minutes how virtual reality can in fact be used for a laboratory-based class. So here it is. So that is just a little walkthrough of what immersive learning application can do for laboratory class. But as I've said, we just pilot tested this last semester. Initially, what the professors were doing, they took their laptops with them in the lab and demonstrate that to their students how to do the laboratory works, but it didn't turn out well. And so they tested on augmented reality first, and I think it did not also turn out well. However, this one turned out quite well, but the main issue in the pilot test was that some students were, again, disenfranchised, if that is the right word to describe, because I think only 40 to 50% of the student, population who are enrolled in this course were able to actually have access, because this one requires specialized gadgets to be able to do the experiment. So, but you can have this also as one of your options on the table. All right. So, but before I just go on to my next slide, let me just, for a moment, just give you an idea what the big blue button application looks like. We use this, as I've said, as a platform for our synchronous or live sessions. So let's have a look for a few seconds on how the particular platform can be operated. So here you go. Just hold on for a sec. All right. All right, here we go. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon to you, sir.
I received your email last night about your inquiry on the study plan that I have designed for you based on your submitted form.
Yeah.
Electronic meeting number 1 this semester. And in the email, you mentioned that, oh, by the way, do you see my screen, Yakub?
Yeah, I see it. Okay.
Study plan. Do you recognize that last night? Okay.
Yeah.
In that email, if I remember right, you inquired. All right. Okay, let me just go back to the screen because there's a lot of things to cover. Okay. All right. Now, just to mention it, that the BBB, as I've said, this is where we hold our virtual class, our live session, the synchronous session. The good thing about BBB, I think it's also true with Google Classroom. I'm not so familiar with Google Classroom anyway. Maybe Blackboard, Edmodo, if these are your LMS. There is the main room, that's like what you've seen earlier, where we can interact and hold a virtual class with your students. And there is also a breakout rooms where you actually can assign students for their group activities, okay? So that's actually my one of my favorite features there when the students are in the breakout rooms. And also there's one feature in the BBB, or in the big blue button, which I cannot show you now for time, is their interactive survey, in which I use it actually for warming up activities, okay? So maybe if you have the time later on, you can explore the interactive features of Big Blue Button if you're considering still one LMS to have for when your classes start in August. Now, moving on, let me now tell you about how we operate our virtual learning, okay, in the university. So now that we know about the LMS and the supplementary Edtech applications, and we also understand how to operate synchronous and asynchronous sessions, the question now is, how would you then design your virtual teaching implementation plan, okay? So what should be the mechanism that virtual teaching is to be carried out? This is the second set of good practices that I am sharing with you. So on the screen right now, obviously, is the schematic diagram of the modes of our virtual delivery. And this guides us in checking regularly its students' participation or engagement in the 2-session weekly cycle. This also helps ensure that we are taking the right approach in ensuring that learning process would have the essential learning elements of pedagogy embedded. So it's actually, if you can see, in a weekly teaching instructional loop, okay, we combine a live and recorded session, and there is also a mix when there is a need to extend that session beyond the official teaching hours. All right. Now, before we proceed, I need you to think of at least imagine your own virtual classroom. Okay, I need you to imagine. If you are not into virtual teaching yet, just at least imagine and tell me which pedagogical element, we've been saying about interaction, collaboration, and feedback, which pedagogical element you would need the most, okay? Is it interaction, collaboration, and feedback? Tell me. Again, this is in the Mentimeter app. You can either scan the QR code shown on the screen right now, or you can type menti.com and enter the code that I will show you in a bit and key in your answer. Let's have again 2 minutes for this activity. So let me just show you. There you go. All right. So this is the code 37539. Again, I repeat, 37539. Tell me which pedagogical element for you is the most important and maybe something that is indispensable. Okay, is it interaction, collaboration, or feedback? Tell me. Carry on. So I have one vote for now. Let me hear the others. Apparently, interaction is the favorite. Okay, but you cannot also discount the importance of collaboration and feedback. So please tell me which one is the most important pedagogical element for you. All right. Okay, numbers are coming in. Carry on. Okay, we have 1 more minute. Come on. Tell me your answers. If you have to keep one of these elements, what would that be? Okay, so apparently we have, we've seen the favorite of the audience. Interaction, obviously, seems to be the favorite of the crowd. But I'm also seeing numbers. That's interesting. I'm also seeing numbers for collaboration and feedback. Okay. 30 seconds. All right. Numbers are still coming in. Just continue. But let me just go back to the main slide. Okay. All right. Okay. Now, ladies and gentlemen, apparently our responses are diverse, but we are in agreement that these learning elements of pedagogy are indispensable. Okay. We cannot dispense any one of them. Okay. Perhaps depending on our context, depending on our learning outcomes, depending on our instructional objectives, either of these learning elements of pedagogy would play a crucial role in our virtual teaching. I would like to share with you the research of Dr. Bill Piltz. I don't know if you heard about the guy. In his book on effective online pedagogy, he concluded that these learning elements, okay, interaction, collaboration, and feedback, have strong positive linear correlation with student engagement, okay? And what does it mean in the language of research? It simply means that these learning elements move together or they synergize each other, okay? Hence, when the level of the learning elements is high, the level of our student engagement is also high. And that's an important thing to note. Now, let's discuss the good practices on how to manage the first element of interaction. But first, what is interaction? Moore defines interaction as a learning element that facilitates communication skills, and that also stimulates engagement. For learners' interaction to be effective, Moore said that it should be able to penetrate through 3 layers. Okay, what are these 3 layers? With the other learners, okay, interaction with the other learners, interaction with the teacher, and interaction with the content. And how do we manage this in our virtual classroom? Let me tell you. So this is what you should do in your virtual class to manage interaction. Since you are using either Moodle or any other LMS, for example, Google Classroom, Blackboard, Edmodo, for your asynchronous session, recorded session, make sure that your students get the opportunity to at least interact with the content. And how do you do this? You can do this by creating model quiz, for example. And there are, by the way, a variety of ways that you can create model quiz or any other LMS for that matter, okay? You know, as I've said, the quiz will provide the opportunity for your students to interact with the content by enabling the content to auto feedback, okay? Students answer. You can also activate the Moodle forum, as I've said earlier, for lesson related questions, not for personal questions, okay? And make sure also that the design of your audio narrated PowerPoint presentation follow an instructional design model. This you do with Gagne, okay, design, which I will speak at length in a bit, okay? Now, using the big blue button or maybe your Google Meetup or maybe your Zoom, if that is the one that you're using for the live interaction, you make sure that you enable interactive features like public chat, your shared microphones, and your video cameras, okay? But let me tell you this, mics and cameras are only enabled for a specific class purpose, like discussion, recitation, and presentation. Why do you think we need to do that? Why do we think that we have to disable the mic by default when we start the virtual session? What's the rationale for that practice? Can you think of a rationale? Well, I'll give you the answer. Because otherwise, your voice will be competing with 30, 40 other voices in your virtual classroom. Okay, and of course, in the Philippine setting, maybe we're talking of 50 or even 70 voices in our virtual classroom. And of course, the result is, you know, what will be the result? Okay, it will be a real chaos. Okay, and you don't want that to happen, of course. Okay, in other words, educators, professors, you have to be prudent when managing noise, as it would potentially interfere instruction. So, and that's one strategy that you have to have in your virtual classroom when you want to manage interaction. Okay, because otherwise you're left with nothing. Okay, when you don't manage noise in your virtual classroom. All right. Now, moving on, how do you manage the second element of collaboration? Okay, Vygotsky defines collaboration as a learning element that facilitates teamwork, a fourth industrial revolution skill. Learners work together to complete a task, okay, solve a problem, or create a product. So this is what you can do as a good practices in your virtual class to manage collaboration. So again, using your Zoom or Google Hangout or your big blue button, okay? In my case, I use my big blue button for simple tasks, okay? And those complicated, complex tasks in OneDrive, okay? Why? Because if the task requires extended work time, or it requires longer work timetable, I would rather use OneDrive. But for smaller or simple tasks that can be done in 30 minutes time frame, then I would use it. I will have it done in the big blue button. Okay. Now using BBB, you lay down your expectation for group activities first. That's what you have to do, just like in the usual physical classroom that we do. Can you share to me, for example, your expectation for group activities? Can you name some? What do we usually do and tell our students in a group activities? The first thing, of course, are expectations, right? So can you recall some of those expectations that you would usually have in a physical group activities? So let me give you an example. So for example, you would tell your students that when they are in the breakout rooms, by the way, breakout room this is the virtual room where students do their group activities. So you can tell them, for example, when you are in the virtual breakout rooms, you tell them that you expect them to think actively about the task, negotiate their thoughts with their group mates, and seal the deal, okay, on what they have agreed on, and eventually share it, okay, with the other groups when they are back in the main room or in the main session room. It is important, ladies and gentlemen, that our expectations are reasonable, clear, and doable. well within the session time of at least 60 minutes, because you cannot go beyond 60 minutes in a virtual classroom. That will be, for me, counterproductive, okay? The attention span of our students are not simply into it, okay? So we have to make sure that we should be careful in terms of time management planning, okay? And in our university, for example, the maximum time that we can hold student in a virtual classroom is only for 60 minutes. Now, using OneDrive, you can also ensure that the task is broken down in related chunks and provides scaffolding support to avoid cognitive overload, okay? Have you heard about cognitive overload? Okay, it is similar to what our students would say, a toxic class. That's the usual expression of our student. That my class with Professor X is very toxic. I can't take that anymore. I can't breathe. I'm gonna die. Okay. So when you hear students saying that kind of comment for your class, that student is actually, that's not, of course, that student does not dislike you personally, but that student simply is having a cognitive overload. And that is something that you have to reduce, okay? Now, equally important, ladies and gentlemen, is the creation of milestone check. I do this regularly, and this is to reward accomplishments for complicated tasks in OneDrive. And for me, personally, I think students are well motivated when you celebrate their accomplishment, and that reinforces positive behavior for them, especially that we are now in the virtual space. You got to have a lot of encouragement for them. Okay, now talking about cognitive overload, okay? When in managing collaboration, you have to also neutralize the threat of cognitive overload in your virtual classroom pedagogy. Sometimes with teachers, we have the tendency to give full details. I'm guilty of that. I'm one of the guilty party of that, okay? We have the tendency to give the full details of the task to our students, thinking that our students would be more competent and will enable them to accomplish the task more competently. But the sad reality is this: for most of the time, those extra details that are non-essentials actually do more harm than good. Cognitive overload is a real threat, okay, to sound pedagogy, especially now that we have shifted to a remote virtual learning space. So how do we at least minimize or reduce cognitive overload? Here's what the Jong 2010 has suggested. First, you can cut related tasks into smaller chunks for easy digestion. I like the analogy there. Provide scaffolding support. It's like a ladder, step-by-step instruction, okay, for each task, problem or project that you immerse your students into. And this is again also very important. Create opportunities for students to collaborate in a mixed ability group to share the cognitive load. I would like to highlight that this has to be mixed ability, heterogeneous as opposed to homogeneous, okay? In this strategy, it will not only reduce cognitive load for all, but also will help the weaker students, okay? Now, finally, how do you manage the third element of feedback? Okay, Haiti and Temperley conclude that in their experimental study in 2007, that feedback empowers learners to become self-reliant by developing their capacity to self-regulate learning. Note that, ladies and gentlemen, that in the Philippines right now, you are outcomes-based. You are into outcomes-based education. This feedback that I'm talking about should be criterion reference-based. In other words, it has to be based on the rubric that you have framed your assessment with, okay? You cannot just, give feedback out of the blue. It has to be based on the rubric or any other criterion reference tool that you use for OBE assessment, okay? However, we have also to note that Hattie and Timperley, in the same study that I'm talking about here, they stress that effective feedback should transcend, okay? Transcend, meaning should go up, level up, okay? From task or performance level up to the process level, okay? In which learners reflect on specific learning strategies. And finally, up to the self-regulation level, where they themselves, the students themselves, the learner themselves, monitor their own learning. And the second, as we know, and the second and the third level of this feedback loop are actually higher metacognition skills, which we want our students to develop. Okay, remember the word feedback relates relates to the promotion of metacognitive skills, and that's a very important to note as well. So this is what you can do as a good practice to manage feedback in your virtual class. So using BBB, or again, as I said, Zoom or Google Hangout, whatever you have there for your live session, you can make sure that you make sure rather that you are actively engaged in the breakout rooms. Okay, students should see you, that you are there. Okay, that you are visible. We cannot just say, class, let's go to the breakout rooms, work there and work with your groups there, and I'll take my coffee. Definitely you cannot do that. Okay, so you have to be visible around your students, and your students should feel your presence there, although virtually. Okay, and how do you do that in a virtual classroom? Any idea? Just like in the physical classroom, you move around. So personally, what I do, I hop from one breakout rooms to another, and I said, hey guys, I'm here. Hey Jason, have you been doing this or not? Okay, are you off track? Okay, so they would, sometimes students are taken aback, oh, Dr. Carlo is back. Okay, so be around with them, okay, in the virtual breakout rooms. So you can do such by giving them also timely and constructive feedback, even wake-up calls sometimes for those who are not engaged. Okay, and you do this while they are still in their breakout rooms, while they are working with their groups in the breakout rooms. It is the same strategy that I use for OneDrive, but let me just stress this, that the advantage of OneDrive is that they will see if they are able to, the students, okay, will see if they are able to act on my feedback and make progress from those feedback that I've given them. And for me, that is a good thing because students can monitor and self-regulate their learning. So that's why I've said, I'm a fan of OneDrive for extended learning. All right. Now, we've been talking about managing the elements, ladies and gentlemen, but how about embedding them? Because that is what this session is all about. How do we embed the learning elements there? When you say embed, it's just there. It just would come out naturally. It will just emerge naturally. Okay. So how do we embed that in the learning system, in the teaching system? The answer is found in the learning design of our sessions, both synchronous and asynchronous. Okay, if you are into virtual teaching already, okay, and you have not thought of any learning design for it, stop for a while, have a step back and reflect how you can, embed the learning design in your virtual teaching. The learning design is the framework or the template which would serve as the prototype, okay, for our lessons or session design. Having a learning design, ladies and gentlemen, in place is one of the best practices that you can do in virtual teaching. To be honest about it, when we started in the Polytechnic, our virtual teaching, for the first 2 weeks, we didn't think about learning design. We just go live directly, and then later we realize, are we doing this the right way? Okay, so and then we met as a team, and then we discussed, and then we made it as an institutional practice that we should have a learning design embedded in our virtual teaching delivery. So I would in particular recommend, as mentioned earlier, Gagne's model. Gagne's instructional design, as we all know, is based on cognitive social constructivism. Have you heard about that? It's an educational philosophy that advocates that learners construct knowledge not only through their meaningful learning experience, but more so through their social interaction and collaboration with other learners. That's why I'm a fan of Gagne's instructional model. So as you can see, there are 9 learning events in the model that you have to embed your virtual sessions. The challenge, ladies and gentlemen, is in particular event number 1, event number 3, event number 4, and event number 9. Why do I say, or sorry, event number 8. Why do I say that they are, this group of events are a challenge? because these events, these learning events require a virtual teaching application, okay? And these are the gaps that your EdTech application must bridge or fill in, okay? Now, having said all these, how can we ensure then that these learning elements of pedagogy are embedded in our practice? All right. First, we need to revisit the modalities of our virtual delivery and check if they have an established instructional design. So for example, the instructional design model by Gagne, shown in the first column in this table, okay, it is assumed that when modalities, be it synchronous and asynchronous or mixed, when they have established instructional design in them, the learning elements are guaranteed. Okay, for instance, as shown in the table, to have the element of interaction, as shown on the table, to have the element of interaction there, okay, you got to have at least the 4 layers of learning events, as you can see, as covered by the green arrow. Okay. Now, this is also true for the asynchronous, for the synchronous session. The session should have at least 7 layers. So it is more demanding now of the learning event that it should cover when you go live. Okay. This would guarantee the elements of interaction, collaboration, and feedback are put in place. So apart from ensuring that each session must have the necessary learning elements in them, learning design must also ensure that instructional objectives and that you put in there must progress from low cognitive level to high cognitive level. And that is what we like to have when we go live, when we go for a live session. As I've said, it's like a flipped classroom, okay? That you go for low level cognitive objectives in the recorded session, but see to it that when you go live, you're hitting or you're working on the high cognitive level, okay? And as we all know, according to Bloom's taxonomy, higher order thinking skills refer to analysis, to evaluation and creation, which can afford our students for a collaborative, problem-based learning during live session. And that's something, a happy note to take into consideration, okay? Now, second, oh, by the way, I hope that this is not cognitive overload for you. If it is, then my apology, okay? My intention really here is to give you a macro perspective on where you would embed, okay, your learning elements into specific learning events, okay, as espoused by Gagne's instructional model. So the second is to review the current and the prospective educational technologies or edtechs, okay, and check if they had been effective or they will be effective to provide the interactive or collaborative solutions to a particular learning event. A clear utility match between edtech and learning design is another best practice in virtual teaching. So for example, when you look at the engage, activate, prior learning in the first column, okay, that event has to be interactive, okay? You may complement your BBB with edtech apps like Kahoot, Padlet, and recently Mentimeter, the one that I've showed earlier, okay? I think this, and also maybe you can also consider earlier. For me personally, that app is underrated in terms of its interactive feature. You might as well have a look on that, okay? Another example is when you look at the assessed performance level, okay? Again, in the first column, second to the last row, okay? The learning event has to have interactive and collaborative element. You may complement your Moodle quiz or any other quizzes you have in your elements there with OneDrive, okay? Or even with VoiceThread. It's actually a new application, or Socrative, okay? I see potential in these apps in terms of collaborative and feedback features, okay? Now, the bottom line, ladies and gentlemen, is this. EdTech solution and tools should be deliberately selected and blended strategically and creatively to the main learning platforms in order to enhance specific aspects of the learning experience of our students, okay? That is our main goal. It should have a clear match with a specific learning event. And I cannot overemphasize on that. Just a caveat, no amount of sophisticated technology, okay, would have the greatest impact on the learning process but how we would apply these technologies on our virtual teaching that would make the greatest impact on our students' learning. So, to show just to you some of those apps that I mentioned earlier, this is the Mentimeter. It's not proprietary, it's a free app. You can use this to, for example, when you're talking about learning design for activating, for catching attention, or gaining attention, or for activating prior learning or prior knowledge and experience of your students. So I'm showing you now the page where you can actually tweak, okay, this application when you are trying to create them. This is Padlet. This is another app that I use when you would like your students to have a showcase of their portfolio for the week that they have done. The sample that I'm showing you here is the Padlet of my kids in their school. So here they're showing to their teacher and to the other learners what they have done for the week based on the learning outcomes for the week. So it's a good way of showcasing evidence of your learning experiences and telling to the whole world, hey guys, I'm doing this for this week and I'm learning new things. So you can also do that, okay, for your higher education students. Now, the other thing that I would like to show you is Kahoot. Are you familiar with Kahoot, which is another engaging app? Let me just try to just share to you how Kahoot would be used for this particular for virtual learning. So let me just go there for a while and see. By the way, Kahoot is not proprietary; it's free. So you might as well take advantage of that when you are trying to engage or activate prior learning, or even for assessment. You can actually use Kahoot. So let's have a try for a few questions and let's see how. Can you please take out your mobile and go to kahoot.it, okay, and key in the PIN code 950698. 950698. Okay, let's try for a few questions and see the dynamics of this app. Okay, 950698. I'm waiting for players. Okay. All right, I can see that more players there. Okay, can we have more players at least 10 or 5? Let's just proceed with some of the app. Let's see the dynamics and the interactive features of Kahoot. Okay, come on guys. Go to kahoot.it and then key in the PIN 950698. We'll see how you can actually use this, okay? What we have is a quiz on world capital. So that might as well give you an instant review of your knowledge of geography and world history as well. Okay, so we have 4 players right now.
Excuse me, sir. Can I interrupt you for a moment?
Yes, ma'am.
Meron kasing sounds yung sa inyo po yan, sir. Yung malakas na music.
Okay.
Sasapawan po kasi yung boses niyo, sir, sa music.
Okay. I'm neutralizing the sound now.
Okay, sir. Thank you, sir.
Okay. All right. So let's go ahead with the game. All right. Okay. What is the capital of Turkey? Let's have one more. So Bless NB is leading the game. Okay. So let's have another question. Capital of Germany. I'm sure you will get it. students, and if you have younger learners, even I think college students would love this. Okay, they are competing. It's a healthy competition with their other peers, and it will stimulate them to be more, to be more engaged in the class. So you can use this, as I've said, for assessment, or you can also use Kahoot for just simply activating prior learning. The other app that I would like to show you, this is the last one, the showcase of the app, is what I've used whenever we have a stalemate or a deadlock with my students. Like what do I mean by that? For example, when we don't agree on something, okay, we agree and we can carry on the class, okay, because I'm a bit democratic when when we deal with extended activities. I use this app just to, break the ice. So let me just show that to you, okay. All right, here we go. Let me just, okay. Now this app is called Well Decide. I'm not familiar with the app, okay. So just purposes of discussion, let's have this. Which province, city, and region 11 are the teachers who would sing and dance for our virtual class today? Okay, so you ask first a question, and then that question, actually that question should be a continuous, contemptuous question that they have to debate on, or even they can, disagree on. And the way to, break the deadlock or the stalemate is to just spin the wheel, okay? Let's try that, okay? So that solves the problem. It's Dago City, okay? Another one, Tagum City. So eventually your students will come into the agreement because it's fairly done. All right. So these are just some of the apps that you can actually use for interacting with your students. All right. So I know that it's okay. Hello. Yeah, that was fun, right? So you've been giving a blend of different applications that you can use for that particular, for your virtual session, okay? Now, let me tell you about the numbers this time, all right? I'm sure at the back of your mind now, you would ask me, especially for higher education educators, you would actually ask people around if that practice has any evidence or empirical evidence to support its efficacy. Okay, so here are the numbers that that support the effectiveness of this particular practice. The first is a study that we've conducted in this semester, in which we compared the digital footprints of our students with their perceived digital learning satisfaction in a survey. Okay, the study involves a cohort of 385 students, okay, with a digital footprint access rate of 97% and a survey participation rate at 92%. Here's what the numbers are telling us in a nutshell. It's above average, okay? The satisfaction level for all the three indicators, but evidently the data retrieved from digital footprints are higher than those that we have retrieved from the perception-based survey. Okay, why is this? Because a simple analogy to this phenomena could be similar to a situation when someone asks you, for example, how was the movie that you have just watched? And your reply was, it was just okay. But the video cams in the cinema captured your face glued quite a number of times, okay? And every time that you were amused by a scene in the movie, your face glowed, okay? And in fact, almost 90% of the time you were, okay? So your response actually really was just an understatement of what actually was your experience in the movie house, which is, of course, more than just okay. So in fact, it's for you, it's an extraordinary experience. So this is what happened to our students in their virtual classroom experience. They thought, okay, that their experience was just a mere all right, okay? But in fact, their footprints, their digital footprints say more than that, okay? Now, Here's another one that we have analyzed for this semester. The second is when we look at the assessment data and compared formative versus the summative performances of our students. The participation rate for both assessment, by the way, is 97%. Here's what the numbers are telling us. There's a significant improvement in the performance level between the formative and the summative data in both assessment, as indicated by a consistent decrease of our fail rate, and conversely, a consistent increase of our pass rate for both assessment in RW or read write and LS or the listen and speak assessment. These are promising, ladies and gentlemen. These are promising empirical or quantitative evidence, but these, of course, need to be verified and statistically tested and proven that there is indeed a positive correlation that indicates a positive impact. But looking at the numbers at face value, it's a very encouraging number. But of course, it requires further statistical investigation. Now, in closing, I would like you to help me fill out the missing words from Benjamin Franklin's statement. Write your answers in the public chat. So let me show you the answer. Okay, before I'll show you the answer, could you just help me fill this out? Okay, you know the man, Benjamin Franklin, one of America's greatest thinkers. Okay, so he once said, tell me and I blank, teach me and I may blank, and involve me and I blank. Okay, what are the missing words? Okay, can we have 30 seconds for this? Okay, all right. Okay, now here are the answers. So the first one is forget. You might have forgotten this quotation. The second one is remember. And the third one is learn. Okay, so now let me read to you the full quotation from Benjamin Franklin, one of America's greatest thinkers. Okay, his quotation holds water today more than ever. And it reads, tell me and I forget, teach me and I may remember, but involve me and I will learn. Ladies and gentlemen, let us involve our students more so now that they are in the virtual learning space. In doing that, let our pedagogy be our compass. Finally, I would like to share my personal takeaways from this retrospect. The first one, there is no educational technology that fits all. Our choice should be based not only of our organizational context, but also on how a technology fits or matches our specific learning event in the instructional loop. Second, whatever is the chosen platform or Edtech, our virtual classroom still requires a sound pedagogy. Quality is non-negotiable. And finally, interaction, collaboration, and feedback should be embedded in a virtual classroom pedagogy. Here are my references. Ladies and gentlemen, I like in particular the one from Gagne. Obviously, this has practically all the theoretical support that I need in reflecting on this practice of virtual teaching. So if you're doing your graduate thesis now or your postgraduate dissertation, and you're interested in the topic that I have just shared, you now have a clear route on where you can start, specifically on your review of related literature. And also at this point, let me do a quick promotion of my two latest books published under Amazon Kindle. Let me just show you the title. The first one, if you're teaching research in higher education, this could be a practical guidebook for you. The title is Doing Academic Research with Ease. Okay, it's available on Amazon Kindle. It's now live there. And there's also a paperback version for that. The other title is Techniques for Essay Writing. If you're a language writing teacher, please consider the title as well. The good news is that a work text version of this book will be available soon in the local market in the Philippines. I think CNE will publish this work text version of my book, maybe in the early quarter of next year. All right. So thank you for your attention, everyone. Back to you, Dr. Maureen.
Thank you, Dr. interesting talk. We've heard a lot of tips and ideas. Okay, so before jumping to our Q&A, let me also award this certificate of recognition to Doc Carlo. This certificate of recognition is hereby awarded to Dr. Carlo Domingo Casinto for generously sharing his expertise and time as the resource person during the conduct of CHED 11 webinar number 7 with the topic Embedding Pedagogy and Blending Edtech Solutions in the Learning Design of a Virtual Classroom, a portfolio of good practices among the administrators and faculty of higher education institutions in Region 11, held on July 16, 2020 via Zoom, Facebook, and YouTube live streaming. Issued the 16th day of July 2020, Davao City, Philippines. Signed, Dr. Maricar R. Casquejo, CHED Region 11 Director. Thank you very much, Doc Carlo, and also Doc Chanda for
Most
sharing
welcome.
your remarkable insights and best practices to us. And now we are ready for our Q&A. So may I call in Doc Chanda again to answer these questions? I have already here some questions. The first question is addressed to Ma'am Chanda. This is from my colleague, Eliza Molina. So this is the question. Great to know that you were able to cope with a teaching episode when you felt that you were unsuccessful. Do you count discrimination as a factor for initial struggle in teaching those boys? You want me to repeat the question, ma'am? Ma'am, kindly unmute your mic, ma'am. It's still muted.
Yeah, what about that? Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. Oh, okay. You can repeat the question, please.
Okay,
Thank you.
Great to know that you were able to cope with a teaching episode when you felt that you were unsuccessful. Do you count discrimination as a factor for initial struggle in teaching those boys?
No, I don't think so. It's not about race. Well, I am in a very white school. It's 70% of our students are Europeans. It's more of the way they learn. I come from a all girls college background, and at first I struggled to teach the boys because they learn differently. And so it was more of that. But as I mentioned, we have high trust model. So it's more, it's part of the system where we ask people to come and not really mentor, but watch us teach and then comment and make suggestions. We do have that. Like, I'm the head of department. I have 12 teachers under me, but I can invite any of them to come and watch me teach. That's just the way it is. That's how we do teaching as inquiry. So you ask questions from your colleagues. So it's more of like mentoring each other. It doesn't matter if you're the head, if you're new, but we learn from each other.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. Okay, so the second question can be answered by any of the speakers. What measures can be observed or taken to protect academic integrity for assessment in a blended learning? I will repeat.
All right. Can I answer that first?
Sige, sir.
All right. The question is how you ensure academic integrity, okay, in academic learning. So I think that question is anchored in particular on assessment because it's talking of academic integrity. Is that what the question is?
Yes, sir.
All right. Now,
is it integrity or authenticity of assessments?
Integrity for
I think the word is integrity. So
Yeah.
I'll answer that. That can be answered in a multidimensional perspective. So that's a very challenging question, but I will have a calculated answer on that. I would rather delimited on assessment. Okay. So first of all, creating assessment in a totally virtual learning space is a challenge. So that's why I said in your LMS, you have to really insist, okay, that you have the necessary plugin or web tool that you can actually detect any anomalies, okay, in the submitted work of your student. One of that is what I've said, Turnitin is a time-tested web tool. Post-assessment, I would say that the first thing that you need to lay down are parameters that would ensure that your assessment should have the necessary capacity, that it would ensure integrity. When I say ensure integrity, it is in a way be able to avoid score inflation and any anomalies. So how do you do that? In our university, in the Polytechnic, we actually have put in place certain parameters in a virtual assessment. One, you can either restrict date and time of access, that's one. You can also reshuffle question, that's the second. Third, you can create multiple versions of the exam, okay? Fourth, you can disable multiple attempts, okay? And this is what we do usually on the actual assessment date. You have to tell your students that you can do random camera check, random webcam check while they are doing their assessment at home, okay? And of course, all of this are meant to ensure integrity. Of course, but again, it's I would say there is no 100% guarantee that you are in a virtual learning space, that what your students have with them for assessments are totally a reflection of their learning competencies. You cannot essentially, I would say, guarantee on that. But however, if those parameters are in place, it will reduce those threats for integrity, I would say. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, the same thing with what Carlo has just said. We have invested so much in Turnitin. Like for my department, I had to spend, like every year, I think it's 5,000. How much is 3,000? 250,000 for 300 something students. So it's quite expensive to turn it in. It's called Feedback Studio. Turnitin is the brand, the product that they're selling is Feedback Studio. That's very expensive. You know, I think you have to pay $8 per student. And but before Turnitin, the ministry has given us several, criteria on how to go about our assessments. Now for RE and for English, I used to teach English. So our assessments are essay. They're all essay. So like critiquing a film, creative writing, like reflections, film review, written film review. Those are the types of assessments we do. And also essays for RE, like 3,000. We have word limits, 3,000 word essays. So what we do is that we to ensure authenticity of the work, we have, portfolios where it's staggered submission, not just submitting them, in like just in one day. So it's more of the student should be able that they're working on a particular assessment and it's time bound, that they should be able to show that they do it in progression. So you actually see the drafts being written and submitted. It's coming back and forth. That is if you don't have Turnitin. So that's ensuring that they are really working on the task. And another would be to ensure that resources from which they would get the evidence, we call it evidence here, like, the quotes, like stats and however, we use different terms here. So we call them evidence. make sure that you provide the resources, that they cannot just get it from somewhere. Okay. And so in other words, you provide readings and you know these readings by heart so that they just don't copy and paste. That's how we do it here before we had turned it in, because it's expensive. But for years now, we've been using that. But before that, when I was still an English teacher, we use these strategies: do it portfolio, progression, submission, and progression, and knowing your resources, giving them and providing them readings. I think that's one effective way that we do it here.
Okay, thank you.
All right, and just to add something on the point that Chanda's raised, well, prudent would dictate that if you were a part of the assessment team, and if you see after the assessment that there is score inflation, when score inflation, this is like there is an impossible number of students to get that much. Okay, so if you will see score inflation, that's indication, that's a red flag for anomaly. And if you look at the graph, okay, if all indicators, if all scoring indicators would point out to an abnormal curve or an abnormal distribution, then that's a red flag that, hey, you get to look at back the way how your assessment is carried out, administered, because there is no integrity, okay? There might be a threat for integrity there when all these indicators are present. Okay.
Okay, thank you, sir. Another question addressed to Doc Chanda, I believe. Are Padlet and Edpuzzle compatible with any LMS? Among these tech tools, which one can you recommend to be used in higher education?
Puzzle.
Edpuzzle.
Edpuzzle. Okay, Edpuzzle is a tool where you create, videos. I don't use that, but some of my some of my teachers use Edpuzzle online, like so that they just have to deliver the lectures, short lectures, once, and so they upload that on our, our Google Classroom. I think that's one good way. That's an effective tool that you can use. On one hand, if you want, like recitation and an interaction, Padlet could be a good tool for you to use. And it's free. But if you're, if you have money as an institution, you can buy, you can buy the what do you call this? The advanced version. And so you can have as much Padlet as you can.
Can I just add something on that?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, you have to also know that Edpuzzle or Padlet are not the LMS, okay? They are just supplementary educational technology applications. So they complement LMS, so they operate separately, okay? Again, as I've said, the rule of the thumb is you got to have one LMS. It could be either Moodle, Google Classroom, or you had your Edmoodle, okay? But you get to have a variety of educational applications. Again, the caveat there, as I've said, do not just choose any educational application if there is no clear match to the learning event of your instructional loop, okay? There should be a clear match.
Thank you, sir. Another question from Iris Rowena Bernardo. Anyone from the speakers can answer this. Majority of the online learning platforms require access to the internet. Many college students do not have access. So how can this be addressed? Also in primary and secondary level students.
Dr. Chanda, you might want to answer that first.
Yeah, no, you can. I've said that in my, insight.
Earlier in my slides.
Yeah, because, yeah, I don't know. Because in New Zealand, we did have that problem. We did have that problem, and the government provided for, for the students. Plus the infrastructure So I'm really confused how you're going to do it. So I will salute you for that. I don't know how you're going to do it.
All right, I think I have an answer for that, a calculated answer. In the earlier slides that I presented 4 modalities, right? If you remember that. And each of these modalities anchored on the connectivity status of the students. So in the circumstance that the students' connectivity status with the internet is low or limited, then you can go for blended modality, which you can actually combine a electronic module or a print module with any analog or digital media. And it doesn't require a full digital delivery. As I've said, it can just be a partial virtual delivery. Okay, but I think I've learned that DepEd is contemplating on blending printed module with, I think, a radio or a TV, and I'm not sure what CHED is contemplating is doing. But these are modalities that you can actually tap in order for you to be able to really serve your students' interests without making sure rather that no student should be left behind. Okay.
Yeah, and to add to that, Carlo mentioned about television. So when during the lockdown, the government used television to deliver lessons. So I don't think if that could be an option in the Philippines.
I think for me it's an option, but however, as I said, I cannot overemphasize on the idea that there should be synchronization. Okay, the materials you have in your module should be in sync, should be synchronized with what you have for radio and TV. They cannot operate in isolation.
Yeah.
So like ABS-CBN will do the job. Oh, sorry, ABS-CBN is now closed. Like have any station, for example, contract them, okay, produce a instructional material for us for our lesson. No, it can't be like that. They have to work in synergy, okay? And that's the challenge for DepEd now. If they have to really go for blended learning, okay, they have to ensure, first and foremost, that the materials they have for broadcast are synchronized with what they have in their module. They cannot be operated in isolation. No, it can't work.
Yeah.
Thank you, sir. Another question from Albert Hubilo. Many small schools are now closing due to low enrollment and other valid reasons. How do we address this issue? Is it possible for these schools to form a collaborative environment? What instructional design model is the best to make an effective instructional delivery in virtual mode?
Okay, when it comes to money matters, I'm really admit, to be honest, I cannot have a comprehensive, competent answer when it comes to finances. But I think at this time, it is very important that government should play an intervening role, okay? The government should extend a helping hand to private schools that are, incapable. They don't have just the resources to conduct a full virtual class. But I've said again, you don't have, if you are a small, parochial school for that matter, you don't have to aim for a virtual full delivery. You can blend that, okay? And of course, always ask for assistance from your local government maybe, or from the national government through DepEd. Things can be exploited at this point of time. And I think that's the essence of what Bayanihan spirit should be. As to the second question of learning design, is she talking about the learning design for
Instructional design model.
for instructional materials? I would say please go for Gagne. There are a lot of learning designs there. For example, Merrill has, AD-IE has, but the AD model is, I think, more for strategic planning. It's not particularly good for prototyping lessons in an instructional material, mode, but it's more for strategic planning. So personally, I would recommend Gagne's learning design to be the most effective for modular instruction and even for blended.
Okay, thank you, sir. Would you like to add to that, ma'am? Ma'am Chanda?
Chanda has a warm smile.
Want to say mean things, you see. When we were on lockdown, okay, to be realistic about online learning, probably in primary and let's say in secondary and even in colleges and universities, we are equipped as a nation, we are equipped as, you know, with our universities. That's how they operate. And it's been there for years and years. Now, the thing about the Philippines is your system, the college system we have in the Philippines, operate the way we operate as a college. So students, you know, move from one class to another. We don't do that anymore in our universities. So when I don't know, maybe I'm just being negative, but when after returning, after having the lockdown and we sort of had meetings again on where do we go from here, because we're anticipating another, you know, wave. But, you know, the school leaders, we were in unison in saying that was just a phase. That was just a phase. We could not operate. I don't know, we have all the resources we need, but we could not operate as we were during the lockdown. You know, it's a big shift. Our universities were untouched. You know, they've been operating that way for years and years. But for us to shift to this, you know, and to think that their limited infrastructure, limited resources. I don't know if this is just something that we do to tie us over, or is this something that we really are serious to take on board? Because it's gonna be a big shift. And it takes years and years to make that shift. So for the first year, I don't know if learning could even take place, because for us, it was just like 7 weeks, but we had, to be honest, we have to reteach. We have to reteach before we assess. We had those assessments because, we were not as productive as we were face to face. So it's just a few really, you know, blended learning as I know it is face to face and face to face and online, okay, like a flip classroom, but blended, you know, technology and you know, you call it analog way of doing it, you know, like modules and all that being sent at home. I don't think it would really work. It would work as something that would tie us over to the next, you know, which would be probably the vaccine, COVID-19, and we're back to the campuses again. So, and we should be clear of that, because, you know, that's a justice issue. For me, that's a justice issue. That's an equity issue. And if we're not clear about that, you know, to me, I don't know. It's just deceitful if we're not really sure of our motives.
Thank you, ma'am. We have a very lengthy question here from Maria Bea Lau. Given the challenge of accommodating a synchronous and synchronous mode of teaching and learning, what are the techniques to ensure that both modality acquire the same amount of knowledge and transfer of information? Since there really is undoubted challenge in internet connection and limitation of resources, do you advise the open access of the teacher's materials in teaching, such as downloading of video lectures for them to listen and re-listen? How about intellectual property of the materials? Another challenge is how can we embed the culture of collaboration and team learning given that our classes are virtual, such as group reporting as activity or group project as output? Anybody can answer the question, ma'am, or sir, would you like to repeat the
Dr.
question?
Casinto will answer the
Masyadong
question.
mahaba kasi yung question.
I'll talk
You
about
like-
collaboration later.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that question. Can you please repeat
I will
that? Can
repeat,
you
sir.
just take it one by one? What are the
Okay.
questions?
So the first question is, given the challenge of accommodating synchronous and synchronous mode of teaching and learning, what are the techniques to ensure that both modality acquire the same amount of knowledge and transfer of information?
All right, I'll answer that. As I've said, my premise was that both modality for virtual delivery should not work in isolation, okay? They should be working towards a common instructional goal. So when you said, how do you ensure that both would have the same amount of instructional goal achieved, I think, when the two complement each other, they synergize each other and therefore would achieve the same, okay? What are the techniques? I think the answer to that is your instructional planning. How do you put into the system on a weekly basis in your timetable, for example, the delivery of recorded session as well as the delivery of the live session, and ensuring that in both sessions, the learning elements are there, okay? The one that Gagne's model was telling us earlier. Okay, as long as the learning elements are there, I think it will guarantee that the pedagogical elements are embedded, and that would, I think, give us a peace of mind that our students are on the right track.
Thank you, sir. A follow-up question. Since there really is undoubted challenge in internet connection and limitation of resources, do you advise the open access of the teacher's materials in teaching, such as downloading of video lectures for them to listen and re-listen? How about intellectual property of these materials?
Well, definitely in your recorded session, you allow access to students to recorded video. And I think there is no proprietary or copyright issue when that video, for example, that instructional materials is in-house produced, okay? And if it is not in-house produced, if it is externally sourced, if it is on the open source category, then I think there is no copyright issue there. Well, if it is copyrighted, it's a different story, okay? So the bottom line here that we're looking at is that make sure that you provide plenty of opportunities for students to be able to access content, okay, at their own convenient time, because that's the essence of synchronous learning is. I'm sorry, the asynchronous learning should be, okay, and that should complement your live session. If your students don't have the access to recorded materials on your LMS, then you are defeating the purpose of virtual delivery. Virtual delivery cannot be like that, okay? And of course, we recognize the issue of copyright. And I think this is the job now of your instructional materials development team to look into what is copyrighted and what is proprietary and what is not proprietary, and make sure that all the materials you have there are something that, you know, will not put your school in a legal, you know, in a legal trouble. Yeah. So it has to be prudently and deliberately planned on.
And last follow-up question.
Yeah, and I would like to say something about that. Here in New Zealand, we don't have problems on copyright. As a school, we would purchase license. Yeah, there's this international, you know, company that we subscribe to, and they take care of, you know, like copyright materials. But lectures, worksheets, resources that you've developed, the moment you upload it, it's not yours anymore. That's part of our job. So it's a different paradigm. So that's part of our job. As teachers, as I mentioned, we don't use books anymore. We don't use textbooks. So we develop our own resources. We develop our, our own program. Yes, we curate our own videos and we make our own videos and we upload it to our systems. The moment we do that, we don't claim ownership to it anymore, but the ministry or the college. So I could not relate to that question. I mean, there's no issue really for us.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. So another question is, another challenge is how can we embed the culture of collaboration and team learning given that our classes are virtual, like group reporting as activity or group project as output? Maybe Dr. Carlo can answer this question.
I see where this question is coming from. Maybe he has not gone through the virtual teaching yet, but this is what I can say. Explore the interactive features of your LMS and the plugins there. So for example, in our case, Big Blue Button, which is actually a plugin in our Moodle LMS, there are certain interactive features, as I've said earlier in my demonstration. For example, you can bring your class to a virtual breakout rooms. This is where collaborative work can take place, okay? And if should you need to extend that beyond your lecture hours, okay? You can use other supplementary educational technologies, OneDrive, for example, Google Document, for example. These are meant to teach our students to virtually connect and collaborate with each other. You know, this is an opportunity for us to really practice what we preach, that in the fourth industrial revolution, the workplace is a virtual workplace. And this is now the time to teach that skill. Okay? This is actually, the pandemic is actually a blessing by these guys. Sorry for my hard words, but this is now the time where we can introduce to our students new set of skills that are needed for the 21st century workplace. Okay, and I said it's just a matter of exploring, exploiting, and finding out yourself what are the interactive features there in Big Blue Button, Zoom, maybe in Google Hangout that you can actually utilize in order to provide virtual collaborative work for your students. It's just a matter of getting to know the technology. Okay, but it's there. It's there.
Okay, thank you, sir. Then we're down to our last question, addressed to Dr. Carlo. I have a 1 hour per week lecture. Do you think I can effectively and completely use Gagnes?
Definitely. That's what we need. 60 hours is enough for a week. That's what you need, madam or sir. 60 hours is what you need to have the full 7 layers of Gagne's instructional model. This is a matter of planning it properly, timing it to a specific particular minutes that you have to do, the interactive work, the collaborative work, presenting your content, do some assessment, do some practice. It's just a matter of timing the events. So your question is, can 60 minutes do the job? Definitely. But again, as I've said, you have to complement that with recorded session because virtual delivery requires not just live session, but also it needs the complementary asynchronous session to go with it. Just like a flipped classroom, okay? Students have to do some homework first. That's what they do when they listen to recorded live session and eventually go to your live virtual classroom and do the rest of the activities there, hitting the higher order thinking skills. So definitely, this might be a inspiring story for you because I've done that. I've been there. I've done that, and the 60 hours is more than enough for you to be able to be virtually a sound teacher in terms of pedagogy. So there you go. Yeah, 60 minutes is more than enough, in fact.
Thank you so much, sir, and Ma'am Chanda, for your insights, tips, and ideas. We really learned a lot. And that's all the questions we have for now. If you are watching in Facebook and YouTube Live, you can still receive your e-certificate of participation, provided that you tune in any of our live sessions and accomplish the post evaluation within 2 hours after the webinar session ended. The evaluation link is flashed on the screen. Okay, so medyo overtime tayo ngayon. But before we end, let's have our photo up first for documentation purposes. So there, the link, the evaluation link on the screen. So may I ask everyone to turn on your videos so that you can see your lovely and handsome faces for our photo op. Sir Rod, ikaw na mag-capture ng picture.
Yes, ma'am. So we have 4 screens. Huh? You have 4 screens now. So we will have, siguro we'll have ano na lang, thumbs up. So we will have first screen, first gallery. Okay, thumbs up please. 1, 2, 3, smile. Okay. Then the second screen. All right. 1, 2, 3, smile. Then the third screen. Okay, 1, 2, 3, smile. And the last but not the least screen, fourth screen. So 1, 2, 3, smile. Okay, thank you. Maui.
Okay, thank you so much for attending the webinar, and I'll see you next time for our next webinar session. Thank you for our resource persons, Ma'am Chanda and Sir Carlo. So
Thank you.
don't
Thank
forget.
you.
Our pleasure. My
My
pleasure.
pleasure. My
Don't forget to
pleasure.
fill out
Thank
the
you.
evaluation. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.